I got to turn this AC on up here because it's hot and I need to get some. There we go. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Okay, I just want to check again. We are recording, so just, is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so we're going to share this with the other members of the group. This is a really terrific turnout, so I thank you all for being there. Michelle, you're a celebrity, so you have quite a big draw. I also wanted to briefly tell all you guys, you know, I've been in this business for 33 years, and it's a complicated business to be successful in, but there's a few qualities that I see consistently in people who are busy. I mean, not busy, but who are successful. And one of those is showing up. And, you know, it might seem like a no-brainer, but there are 174 people in this group who are all invited. And, you know, month after month, it's usually just a handful of people. So just know that you guys are doing at least one thing right in moving your career forward, you know, one thing better than the competition. And I just want to acknowledge you all for making the time to do that.
I see some recognizable names here too. Sarita, we've communicated on Facebook. And of course, Christina, who she knows, she's my baby girl. She knows I love her. Gabriel, whose film I was supposed to watch today and I didn't, but I still have how many hours left of the day? So I have some time. I'll get it watched today, I promise. So yeah, well, it's great seeing you all. So this is a student group? Is everyone here film students, or? Some
of them are students, some of them have a little experience, you know, but the key thing is they're all early in their career.
Right.
Katja is an exception. Katja, you've met Katja before at a screening. She's a script supervisor friend of mine, right. But she also aspires to move into directing. And, you know, since I've said such wonderful things about you, she'd love to hear what you have to say.
Awesome. Well, I may need a script supervisor here in the coming months, so.
Terrific. So, you know, Michelle, you're obviously a Renaissance person. You're a director, a writer, a producer. You're an advocate for filmmakers.
A Wonder Woman fan.
Yep. You're an advocate for diversity and for female filmmakers and for Houston and Texas. And I could just go on. I'm sure I'm leaving some things out. The point that I'm making is that you wear so many hats, and I'd kind of like to, if we can, pace ourselves and touch a little bit on each one rather than getting stuck in any one particular. And then when we open it up to Q&A, the people in the group can ask the questions that are specifically you know, of interest to each individual.
Right.
And I think the way that you know, we like to start these, which I think is helpful for, you know, young people starting out in their careers, is if you could give us, you know, a brief sketch of, you know, what interested you in the business and how you got your start and built up some momentum with your career.
Well, you guys are in luck because I've just spent a good portion of my day answering these exact questions for an 8th grader out of Victoria, Texas, who's interested in becoming a filmmaker. So I have it all fresh in my mind right now. His teacher reached out to me through a mutual friend of mine from high school and on Facebook and said, oh, I hear you make movies. And I have a student who's interested in making movies. Do you mind if he interviews you for a class project? So I've been writing all of this out all day. So it's super fresh. Okay, so what inspired me? What got me into filmmaking? I guess storytelling has just been a part of my DNA for my entire existence. I can't remember a time where I wasn't telling stories. When I was little, they called it, you know, having an active imagination. And I would come up with all kinds of stories. And of course, back then, I didn't understand the difference between lying and telling stories. I just had a very vivid fantasy world, right? And so I think my parents saw something there that they said, you know, it's nice that she's, you know, that she's got such an active imagination, but we need her to understand the difference between, you know, like telling the truth and not telling the truth, right? So I would come up with all kinds of crazy stories for, you know, why I couldn't go to church on Sunday morning or, you know, things like that. So, my parents, you know, encouraged me to write down my stories at a very early age. And so I would write these little puppet plays, and I would create these puppets out of popsicle sticks and, like paper dolls. And then I would force my parents to pay 50 cents each to watch my puppet play. And then I would have money, so that when the ice cream truck came jingling down the road, I'd have enough money for my taco Choco. So Choco Taco, yeah, Choco Taco. So ice cream, I guess that's a good inspiration as any, right, at an early age. But then I got older and went to middle school. In middle school, I was invited to participate in a youth writing conference, and there I met a screenwriter whose name I can't remember at the moment, but he had written a movie, a horror film that was in theaters at that point in time called Witchboard. Maybe you know who he is, Brad.
I'll look him up.
Anyway, he was there, and I was in 8th grade, and quite honestly, it didn't even occur to me. I mean, I watched movies all the time. My sister worked at a movie theater, so she would take me to work sometimes, and I would just sit there and watch, Grease, or I'm totally showing my age by the way at this point, but Grease and The Outsiders and movies like that. And I would watch those movies over and over and over till I had them memorized. So I loved movies, absolutely loved movies, but it didn't occur to me until I met the screenwriter.
His name was Kevin Tenney.
What's that?
Kevin Tenney.
Yeah, I think yes, that's correct. And so it just didn't even occur to me at that point, until that point in time in my life, that movies were actually written. I don't know how I thought they were made. I guess I just figured actors got up on a camera and just started talking. I didn't know. So I think it was at that point in time, like literally at that conference, where I was like, yep, this is what I want to do. I want to grow up and I want to write movies. And sort of figuring out like your life's goals or like your life's calling at 8th grade is kind of a blessing and a curse in many ways, because it seemed like such a huge pipe dream. And I was growing up in little town of Leak City, Texas, a little suburb of Houston, and like, what are the chances that I was going to ever write a movie, A, or get the movie made, B, and C, get it into a movie theater? Like, I had no clue what that entailed, like zero. So, and of course we didn't have the internet back then, again, showing my age. We didn't have the internet. It's not like I could go Google how to make a movie or how to write a screenplay. So the only thing that I could do is hop on my bicycle and ride down to the library and check out a book about writing screenplays. And so I did. I got Sid Field's book Screenplay, and read it front, backwards, up, every which way you can read that book, and started just working out, writing little scripts. I'm not saying they were good scripts, but mind you, they were actually very, very awful scripts. But I was 14, so give me a break. And but I was learning the sort of the craft of telling a story. I was learning how to take all of these ideas that I had in my head and organize them, and give characters voices, and put together a plot that was that made sense, had a beginning, middle, and end. I mean, just the very basics of writing a screenplay, of telling a story through this medium, and doing it in the format, which back then was not easy because we didn't have Final Draft that did it for us. We actually had to put the format the screenplay on our typewriter, and the indentions and everything. We had to count out every single space and so forth. So it was hard work. Like, writing screenplays was hard work back then. It still is. I mean, hard work, but even especially then when we didn't have Final Draft, right? So I was, that was my passion. That's really what I put all of my energies in, was the writing process. When I got to high school, there weren't any filmmaking classes or anything like that. We didn't have filmmaking. I know some schools had like film club and stuff, but I think my school even did have it. I think we did have a film club, but I think when I went one time, it was all boys, and all they wanted to do was like kung fu movies, to where they would stop the camera rolling and then jump out of the shot, and then suddenly it looked like they disappeared. So it's pretty cool, but for a girl who was wanting to tell more meaningful stories, then it just wasn't my thing, right? So I didn't feel like I belonged there, and there wasn't really anywhere for me to go, other than, like I said, to the library. And so where I really found myself gravitating towards was the theater. So I got very involved in theater the theater program at my school, and then also in a local community theater. So that was kind of a blessing in disguise in many ways, because I mean, as a director, I think I probably learned a lot more from, being a part of the theater community and learning the constructs of what an actor does, and learning how to analyze scenes and plays, and that type of thing probably benefits me a lot more now with what I do than if I'd stayed in the film club and did those kung fu movies. It was definitely a part of my growth as a storyteller, and a very important part of that growth. And when I got to college, I went to University of Houston. They did actually have a film program back then where we were shooting on 16 millimeter. Again, I'm showing my age. And I was able to get behind the camera. I would write scripts for the class, little short films, and I would get our 16 millimeter camera, and we'd go out and shoot them as a class. And it was like the coolest thing. I just really, really, really loved making films. I love telling stories through the medium of film, and that's sort of, I guess, does that answer your question? That's a very long-winded.
Yeah, and then also, like, how did you get your start as a professional? How did you get your foot in the door and build up to paying work and ultimately becoming a director of a feature film yourself?
Right. So right after college, actually before I got out of college, I got an internship at Channel 2 and was working in a newsroom. And as much as I loved working in the news, I was there for a little over a year. I just knew that was not where my passions lied. I did not want to get into broadcast news producing. That just wasn't. I wanted to tell stories. I mean, I was telling stories on some level, but it was basically like, little like Twitter version of telling stories, just a little blurb about something with some video over it, and then you go on to the next story, and it's just a series of a bunch of blurbs, these sort of mini stories, right? And there was no room for creativity at all at the news station. If you tried to do anything creative, they were just, nope. The producers were like, nope, just the news, just the facts, ma'am, And so, but it was nice to be able to write something and see it, have someone read the words that I wrote on camera. That was pretty cool initially, but ultimately my passion was my path was to make movies. And I had to figure out how to find that path in Houston, because I was, even though I was, still out of college, I had already gotten married and had 2 kids. And moving to LA or moving to New York, or even really Austin, where there was at that point in time, a very active independent film scene, just were not in the cards for me. I had to figure out how to do this here in Houston. And so I was very fortunate that I became a member of initially, and then later got a job working for an organization in Houston called Southwest Alternate Media Project, SWAMP. And I wanted to go back real quickly and say, before we go too far, that Brad and I actually share a professor, someone who was very instrumental in sort of helping me on my path. Because even after I graduated college, he was always there putting that bug in my ear saying, you need to be telling, you need to be making movies. This is what you were intended to do. I know you, and I know that you're not happy at Channel 2. So that was Professor Coakley, Pat Coakley. And I was his, before I was his student in I took every filmmaking class you could possibly take at University of Houston, by the way. And I think I ended up graduating with like 12 hours more than I needed, just because while I was there, I was going to learn everything, right? But Mr. Coakley wanted me to stay, wanted me to be a teaching assistant for his filmmaking class. And so I stayed an extra semester and then took some other classes, and was able to work with him. So he was always that professor there that even after I graduated kept pushing me, right, to keep pursuing, keep trying, keep working towards making movies, because he saw something in me, as did another professor that I had, Bill Hawes, Dr. William Hawes, who saw something in my writing. He was my screenwriting professor at University of Houston, and I mean, he basically just said, if you can get out to LA and get an agent, you need to be out there now. And like I said earlier, that just wasn't the cards for me. I couldn't do that. And I think he was always a little disappointed that I didn't go out and take his advice and, go out to LA and, try to make a go of it out there. But I think in the long term, and it's certainly now hindsight 2020, I could say absolutely staying in Houston and making my movies in Houston was absolutely the right call. I mean, who knows? I mean, who knows what would have happened if I'd gone out to LA? I don't know. I mean, maybe I'd be even bigger filmmaker than I am now. I don't know. But right now I feel like I'm in the place that I always dreamed or hoped that I would be in. And so I can't really say that staying in Houston was a bad decision for me. I don't think it was at all. And so but it just took me more time to be able to, to build the foundations of my career in Houston than it would have if I'd gone out to LA, right? And not, as I said, I was also raising a family, so it just takes time, right? And so, but I was really fortunate that I got the job with SWAMP, Southwest Alternate Media Project, and my job literally was program director. So I would organize workshops about making movies.
Can you also say a little bit about what SWAMP is and what it does?
Sure. So SWAMP is a, gosh, how old are they now? 43-year-old nonprofit media arts organization based here in Houston. And their mission is to provide resources and information and support to to media artists and filmmakers in Houston, to give them opportunities for, education, give them opportunities for exhibition of their work, give them opportunities of, they even offer grants every once in a while. Gabriel is one of our, so when I worked at SWAMP, one of the coolest things that I started as a program director there was our teen camps. We'd have summer teen camps. And Gabriel was one of our former teen campers many moons ago, right? Probably not as many as I'm remembering, but
not as many for me, no.
Right. So and we've had a number of our teen campers actually who went on to careers in the movie industry and the film industry. Some of them are YouTube influencers. One of them works for, well, she used to work for what was it? She worked for, I want to say Google at one point in their media department, but then sorry, my phone just engaged because I have a Google phone, and when I said Google, it like started recording what I was saying. It's weird. But now I think I want to say she works for Microsoft, and she's developing. I'm totally getting this wrong, and I should probably look it up before I totally obliterate her entire career just with my horrible memory. I'll look it up, but she's like developing some technology that is going to be very instrumental in the future of filmmaking. So, let's see, she's a senior user experience designer at Adobe working on Premiere Rush. So, yeah. Where I help make it easier and faster for people to edit videos and tell their stories. So that was one of our first teen campers, was Gabby Shanisi. And our very first year we did camp. And she came to our camp, I think 3 or 4 times before she, aged out. So I'm really, we're really proud of some of our teen campers. Some of them are editors on TV shows, popular TV shows, so I'm very proud of the work that I did with SWAMP. Anyway, so going back to my story, I guess, so I started working with SWAMP, and I started building an enormous network of independent film professionals, people who would come in and teach workshops for us, people that I became really good friends with over the 8 years that I worked for SWAMP. And they all said the same thing Mr. Coakley was saying: make a movie, just make a movie, right? And so throughout this time, I was writing a screenplay for a movie called The Preacher's Daughter, which was very much inspired by my own experience of being raised by a minister. And so but it was a hard film for me because it was a very personal story and something that is, how we writers are. It's like these stories are so personal to us that we have, we're like, do I really want to share this with the world? Do I really want people to, we could get very protective, I guess, in some ways about stories, right? It's stupid. Don't do that. So, um, so anyway, I was, writing the screenplay for, I won't even tell you how long because it's embarrassing, but for a long time. And I actually started writing that screenplay when I was in college. So it was like good 9 years before I finally made the movie. I wasn't writing it continuously. I would stop and start and stop and start, anyway, so finally I had made a couple of short films, like I think like 2 or 3 short films, and I finished writing the screenplay and I put it in the Austin Film Festival's screenwriting competition, and it placed. I mean, it didn't win, but it was like a second rounder, if you're familiar with it. So it had gone through 2 rounds before the semifinals. So it didn't make the semifinals, but it made 2 rounds, past 2 rounds. And so as a result, they gave me like a free badge to be able to go to the Austin Film Festival. And so I went and I ended up meeting one of my readers, somebody who was a producer in LA who had read my screenplay and passed it on and advanced it to the next round. And this producer was like seeking me out. Like, they're like, I want to help you get this movie made. Like, I want to get you out to LA and I want you to do pitch meetings and I want you to, we're going to get funding for this movie. And at that point in time, I was like, well, I wrote this movie for me to direct. Is that something that's going to happen? And he's like, well, maybe. It's like, I'd never directed a feature film before. And so I think in his mind, he was like, let's just see if we can get some interest, and we'll let this, we'll let the, sort of things play out the way that they're going to play out. So he never promised me to be able to direct, but at this point I had nothing. I was just like, well, if I get my movie sold and somebody makes this movie, well, then I have some credibility, so then I can go direct the next thing, right? So I wasn't like, I was being realistic. I wasn't shooting myself in the foot by trying to be like, oh, I must be the director of this movie, even though I didn't write it for myself to direct. So I went out to LA, I took those meetings, and I got all kinds of crazy notes. I believe it or not, I even had a meeting with Taylor Swift's agent, who, this would have been in 2009. And he basically said, I want you to change this part of the storyline. Like, if she's interested, we're looking for a vehicle for her. We think this could be a really good project and of course, back then, Taylor Swift, I'm like, can she even act? I mean, I'm not a big fan of her music because I don't listen to country. I don't care. Is she even, so I just wasn't seeing Taylor Swift. Like I said, 2009. If I had been in that same meeting, like in 2015 or 16, it would have probably gone. I would have been like, I'll change whatever you want for Taylor, like whatever you want. But see, in 2009, I didn't know what Taylor was that she was going to explode like she did. My lack of foresight, I guess. But it was okay. Like I basically said, no, I'm not going to change my script. Because really he wanted me to change everything. Like he wanted me to take out the whole, I don't know if you've seen the film, but it's about a preacher's daughter who gets into a relationship, inappropriate relationship with the music minister of her church. She's like 17. And she gets into an inappropriate relationship with the music minister of her church, and how it affects, causes her to have sort of this downfall. And then there's sort of this story of redemption where she comes back and is able to sort of get her life back on track. And by confronting what happened to her in her past. So this agent, Taylor Swift's agent, wanted me to take out the relationship with the music minister. And I'm like, so what's the movie about then? I don't know. Like, yeah. That's the movie. Like, what, So I left that meeting not being very, amenable to that idea. And ultimately they, it went nowhere, as many of these. I mean, honestly, I could have gone down that path and said, yes, I'll change the script. And I could have gone through the whole process of rewriting it, and it still could have gone nowhere, and very likely would have gone nowhere. So I, it is, at this point, it was the decision that I made at the time. And like I said, I feel like I made the right decision, as crazy as it may seem now. And so I came back from that trip almost like, I knew that I wrote the screenplay for me to direct, but after that series of meetings and all of these notes that I was getting from people, and all the BS that comes with this industry, I was just like 100,000% sure that I had to direct this movie, because I didn't think that this movie in the hands of those guys out there was going to tell the story that I wanted to tell, right? And I really wanted to tell this story my way. I had already seen movies about preachers' daughters where it was, very stereotyped, very, they're either like, these, wild child characters, or they're little Miss Goody Two Shoes. It really didn't give you a whole lot of room to explore the gray areas of what it's like, being raised in, these religious homes, these very religious homes. And that's what I really wanted to explore in this story, was like, how does being raised in these very religious homes where there's very clear definitions of, and unyielding definitions of right and wrong, how does that, how does that make you who you become in the, especially whenever you maybe fall off that, that path, and so that was a story that I really wanted to tell. And so I knew if I was going to tell my story, then I had to do it myself. So I came back and I convinced my husband to let me use our savings account, all the money that we had saved up to make the movie, knowing that even that was probably not going to be enough. But I figured I had some friends who had made some movies for even less than that. I had friends who were making movies for $17,000, $25,000, and so my husband said, he knew that I'd been dreaming about this my whole life, and he knew that this was my chance. This was my, this was my shot, and I had to, I convinced him that I could do it. And he believed in me enough to say, yes, I want to support you. I want you to be able to do this. And so I moved forward with making this very, very, very low budget film. But as we were still out there trying to raise more money. We were trying to meet with investors and trying to get, a bigger budget. But I don't know what it is. I guess because people just want to see something before they actually commit. They don't want to like put money into something that just isn't real to them, especially here in Houston, because making a movie is just so out there. It just doesn't seem real until the camera starts rolling. And even then, when the camera starts rolling, it's like, but is it good? Is it real enough? Is it good enough? And so we did eventually pick up a couple of investors after we started filming, but and then one other one in post-production. But I had to prove myself first, and I had to do that with my own money. And so we moved forward, and making that movie was literally the hardest thing I had ever done in my life to that point, and that includes raising kids. It was really, really, really hard. I mean, there were days that I was driving home from set thinking, what in the hell were you thinking this whole time? You could have been a banker and worked in a boring ass job and not, like, what in the hell were you thinking? I mean, Christina was there. She could tell you it was hard. It was hard. Yeah. It was a very hard movie to make. And for a number of reasons that we don't probably have time to go into here, but it all the training that I had done, this, going to film school, doing all the classes with workshops with Swamp. I mean, they prepared me on some level for sure. And certainly, I think they, taking those classes certainly benefited me, but you don't really know until you're on set. You're not really prepared until you're there and you do it, right? Skill to do comes from doing. That's Ralph Waldo Emerson, not me. So give him the credit for that quote. But that's one of my favorite quotes. And it's absolutely a quote that applies to this industry. Like, the skill to learn how to do this comes from doing it.
David Fincher has a great quote, and he says that you don't know what it is to be a director until you're on set, the sun is going down, you've got to get 5 shots and you only have time to get 2. Yep,
exactly. That's when you separate the women from the girls, It's like, it is. It's you got 5 shots and you've got to figure out how to get them in 2. And that's when you, as a director, prove your salt, prove what you're made of. And I certainly think I've definitely been in that scenario many times, and I'm sure sometimes I succeeded better than others, but yeah, absolutely. You have to be able to very quickly on your feet make decisions that are going to affect that scene or affect that story. And you have to be able to make those decisions, very quickly, and get everybody behind those decisions, the whole crew, the cast, everyone. And it's a lot of pressure, but once you've been through it, I've been through it, what now, 4 times, 5 times, I lost count. So I've been through it a lot, and well, not a lot, but more than most people, certainly in Houston. And I'm not going to say it gets easier, but your confidence in yourself and your confidence in your own ability to make those decisions on the fly does get better.
So having made the movie, once you went through this process, can you tell us a little bit about, now you've got this movie, you've poured your blood, sweat, and tears and savings into it. You've done post on it. You've made it as good as you can possibly make it. What about selling it? What was the experience, finding a buyer and an audience?
Well, see, this is where the whole part of the story earlier that I mentioned about how I worked for Swamp for 8 years and had built a really incredible network of friends, of professionals, colleagues, and friends. Several of those people came to help me finish the film, like my sound designer, Kelly Baker, who had done a ton of indie films. Like, he did 8 of Gus Van Sant's movies. He was a sound designer on My Own Private Idaho and Good Will Hunting and To Die For and the Psycho remake, which he does not want me to remind people of. But anyway, he was a very experienced sound designer. And being my first film and having a lot of, let's be honest, students who were working on my film for nothing, for very little money. Nothing to say against students. I know some of you are making some really great films, but in my case, some of the people that were working on my film were not as experienced, and certainly were learning on the job. And so mistakes were made, right? I mean, I made mistakes, and I was not even a student at that point. So my sound had some issues, and I sent the film to Kelly and said, hey dude, can you give me like your professional opinion on like what it's going to take to fix this audio, or if it's fixable? Like, can I fix the audio? And if so, how much is it going to cost me? Like, I need to have some like real information right now. And I remember he emailed and said, don't worry about whatever problems you have, they are fixable. So I'm like, okay, that's good to know, but how much is it going to cost me? And he said, well, let me assess it and just figure out what I can do for you. And so he watched the film, he really liked the film, and he came back and said, you've made a really incredible film, I want to help you, and I'm willing to do it for a vastly reduced fee than I would, obviously charge studios, And not only that, he brought a team of his own experience, like a team of sound people, like dialogue editors. Like, my dialogue editor worked on Gladiator, like, and was in between Gladiator and Spider-Man or something. It's like, and he came and did dialogue editing in my movie. So that's where it's like really important to get out and go to these film festivals and get involved with organizations like Swamp and go to their conferences and go to their events, because you're going to meet people who are going to help you finish your movie and finish it as high quality, commercially and commercial of a film as possible. Commercial is an important word when it comes to selling your movie. It's something I didn't understand at the time, because I was thinking of the art form, right? And art is important. It's a huge part of telling a story and making a movie. But what distributors are looking for are commercial content, films that they can sell. And so that part of the equation also came about because of Swamp. When I worked for Swamp, I had started a conference called the Business of Film Conference. It ran for like, I want to say 14 years. And one of our regular speakers that we would bring in to speak at our conference is a woman named Ordley Ravid. And she had started a nonprofit distribution company called the Film Collaborative that consulted with filmmakers. So you could make a movie send Film Collaborative, you join Film Collaborative just like you would join Swamp. That was membership driven organization. And then you could send them your movie and they would review it and they would give you really important information like, okay, what film festivals should you be targeting? Like which film festivals do you think this film best fits? That's an important question, right? Most filmmakers just say, okay, well, I'm going to submit to Sundance, and then they don't get in and they're like, okay, what now? I don't know. So the Film Collaborative are the number one organization when it comes to festival releases. So they know all the festivals, they know which ones are good, which ones are not good, and they're really great about, working with a filmmaker to sort of put together a distribution, a festival release plan or a festival release strategy, right? And so I sent her the film, and another thing that they would help with also is to help connect you with potential distributors. So if you had a film that, they felt like, was ideal for this type of distributor versus that, because not all distributors are looking for the same kind of films, right? They know the distributors personally and they know what they're looking for. And so they could take that film and say, okay, this is who you should be. These are the distributors you should be sending this film to. So that's really important information, right? And so Orly watched the film and she said that she felt like the film was, was very television. That was the word that she used. It feels very television. And largely because all my actors were on television, I guess. So one of them was a soap opera star. The other one was a star of Desperate Housewives. But for whatever reason, she was sensing that it was television. And she said, I really think this could be a good fit for like a Lifetime. And I'm like, okay, well, how do I move to Lifetime? She's like, well, you find a sales company that sells to Lifetime. And I'm like, okay, I don't know any of those, so how do I do that? She's like, well, I know this one guy. He's named Larry Gable. I met him. He seems like a really straight up dude. And I will, if you want, I'm happy to shoot him an email and tell him about your film. And if he's interested, then we'll, send him a link and go from there. I'm like, at this point, I'm game for anything because I just need to sell this movie, right? And I've put all this money and time and effort into it. And, like I said, it was a really hard process. And I needed to see something. I needed to, figure out how to get out into the world. So she emailed Larry and we sent him what was called a one sheet, which is basically like, showed our key art that we had created. It showed like our target demographic information, like who our target demo was for the film, the synopsis, the cast information, just the very basics of what, of the project. And we didn't have a trailer at that point in time. We just had key art. And so she sent that over to him and he responded, send me the movie. So we sent him a link to the movie and that would have been probably like early to mid-November. And then I didn't hear anything. And Orly said that's no big deal because it could be 8 weeks before you hear something. It's very common in this industry to send a film in and send them a film. Back then I didn't actually send them a link. I sent them a DVD. So they had, I'm sure, mountains of DVDs that they had to watch, on a weekly basis. So I was somewhere in this mountain of DVDs. And honestly, this was the first company that we had sent the movie to. So I wasn't like getting my hopes up because I knew realistically that the chances of me making a deal on my first company was pretty low. So I tried to stay honestly tried not to think about it. And about a month later, I was in New York with my sons for Christmas. I always do a Christmas trip up to New York. And we were in the car on the way back to the airport to come home. And my phone rings. The next thing I know, I'm in a conference call with this very, boisterous French-Canadian man named Pierre, who's, lauding me with praise on what a wonderful film I made and how, brilliant and wonderful and, all these, amazing words. And I just like, what's happening right now? I don't know what's happening right now. And it come to find out he was the owner of the company that Larry worked for, Imagination Worldwide. And Pierre was the CEO, Larry was the president. and they were partners, business partners. And they had watched the film, and Pierre said, this would be perfect for Lifetime. I make lots of movies for Lifetime, and I know what they're looking for. I'm one of the #1 Lifetime producers, and I know exactly what they're looking for, and I think this is perfect for them. And I said, oh, okay, well, so I ended up signing with Imagination. We signed in January, and he pitched it to Lifetime, and then by middle of February, Lifetime made an offer on the film, and the offer on the film was big enough to cover all of my expenses on the movie. So even after the commission from the sales agency. So I made my first deal, which was to Lifetime, I made my money back. That doesn't happen anymore, by the way, just to let you know. But it was it was at a point in time when those things happen, right? It's very unusual for that to happen. It was unusual for it to happen even then, but it's especially unusual for it to happen now. So anyway, so I, didn't have to worry about the money anymore because I was going to be able to pay my investors back and myself back, and that was good. And then the film, it took them a little while to get the film into their broadcast circulation. I think we did the deal in February, and it didn't premiere until August of 2012. It actually premiered August 31st of 2012 and ended up being the highest rated movie on Lifetime Movie Network for the entire year. And
Wow.
with Lifetime, if you are successful and you can show them that you can, draw an audience with your work. And here's the key to success. Everybody asks me, how do you make it in this industry? Here's the answer. You make somebody money. If you can figure out how to make somebody money, they will keep giving you money to keep making them money. And that's basically what happened here. They saw, an opportunity to build a franchise off of the Preacher franchise. So the next movie I made was called The Preacher's Mistress, which I did in 2013.
And they financed this, right? They came to you with the money and hired you.
So the second movie, no. The second movie, not really, no, because they wanted another Preacher movie, but they didn't want it to be an original, they wanted it to be more of an acquisition. And so we pitched them the story idea, and they said they liked it and that they wanted to take a look at the movie if it was done. And Pierre had sold enough movies to Lifetime that he knew exactly what they wanted, but he financed it. Lifetime didn't finance it. And so it was financed like an indie film because it was an indie film. At that point in time, we had no guarantees that Lifetime was going to buy anything, right?
Yeah. I guess my point was that you didn't have to pony up the budget again.
Correct. That's correct.
Somebody hired you.
That's correct. Yes, that is correct. So I didn't have to. I did not have to finance any Lifetime movies after that. No. And so we made Pierre financed the second movie, and then he sold it to Lifetime. And that movie was called The Preacher's Mistress. And then the third movie, that movie was also successful enough for them to come back and say, hey, yeah, we'd like another Preacher movie, but this time we do want it to be a Lifetime original. So we had a bigger budget. We filmed in Canada because they have better incentives there. And that film was called The Preacher's Sin, and it premiered in November of 2015. And that was the last Lifetime movie that I did. I decided to, not long after that, buy a film sales and distribution company and took a little bit of a detour from my Lifetime movie making and got into film sales and distribution. And
I'd like to touch on that in just a little bit, but since we're focused on the directing right now, let's fast forward to today. Now that you are a very comfortable and experienced filmmaker with several, feature films and at least one short under your belt, do you have any anecdotes you'd like to share about, working with certain actors or working with your crew? Is either fun or instructive?
Yeah, I think, generally speaking, I mean, the tone of a set is very much, how do I put this? The tone of a set is established in many ways by the director. And as a director, I'm cognizant of that. Now, not to say that you can't get an actor to come in and, sort of throw off the tone, or you can't get, like an actor who's an ego-driven person to come in and shake things up, or a producer or whoever, or even a crew member, but, there's always somebody who could come in and sort of, mess up the dynamic of the set. But I believe it's my job as a director to set that tone, you know, and the tone that I try to set with my crew, with my cast, is a tone of trust. Like, I've got your back, and I, you know, and I expect them to have my back too. You know, like, we're in this together. We are a family. While we're filming this, you are my family, and I am your family. And there's nothing that you can, you know, say to me that's gonna, that's going to, I'll listen. I'll listen to anything that you have to say. So that's another big thing that I think is that directors that really make the better directors are those who listen to their crew and listen to their actors, and really, like, I'm not saying that you have to take every suggestion that comes your way. And you certainly don't want to be the director where, like, you say, okay, come tell me what to do, because then you lose confidence, right? They want to have confidence in you, that you know what you're doing, right? But if somebody has a suggestion and it's a good suggestion, then you should take that suggestion. You should do it, even if it wasn't your idea. Like it's a collaborative process. It's making movies, or television, or, any set. Like, it's a collaborative process. And there are going to be people on that set who actually have better ideas than you. It's going to happen, right? And you have to let that ego go and say, wow, that's a really cool idea. I'm stealing that. And they're like, that's why we told you. We want you to do it because it's a great idea. So like be open, be willing to listen, have trust in your crew, have trust in your cast, and they will trust you. It's really a communication, and communication is key. I mean, like, if you don't know how to communicate with actors, then, like, don't waste anybody's time because you're going to end up wasting a lot of time on set. Learn how to be a director who can very quickly give a note to an actor, so the actor gets it right away. They go do their thing, and you move on to the next thing, right? A lot of people think a director's job is to be like psychoanalyze the scene and psychoanalyze what's going on with the character and their motivation and blah, blah. No, you have no time for that on set, especially on some of these films that I'm working on where we're shooting 120 pages in 14 to 15 days. You don't have time for that. You have to go in there, have a very clear plan, have your shot list. I don't really storyboard unless it's like an action scene, or it's a scene that has a lot of coverage that we need. Like, sometimes I'll be shooting scenes where there's, some gunplay, or, people shooting at each other, or there's a fight sequence or things like that. That I tend to storyboard because I need to be able to organize it mentally in my brain. And, Brad can tell you, when it comes to storyboard, I'm very, very detailed. Like, I cover everything, but generally speaking, I mean, I'll put together a shot list, and it's really more of a way to help me organize, because once you start getting into the production, there's so many people coming up to you, asking you every questions all day long. They're asking questions about wardrobe. They're asking questions about hair and makeup. They're asking questions about lighting. They're asking all these questions. And it's so easy to sort of, like, for your brain to get scrambled, so having that shot list helps you, sort of keep yourself on track, so, okay, yeah, I need to get this shot. And the AD's job is to help you get what you need in that shot list. Right. And so working with them, but at the same time, I may show up to the set that morning and never have been to this location. And I've got a shot list based on just what was in my brain. Right. And so now I'm like, oh, well, I guess I can't do this shot list because I don't have a door there, and I don't have a, whatever. So that's when you get your DP, you get your AD, you get sort of your key, your key, team players together, and you very quickly come up with some shots, some ideas. And that's when you listen. You say, okay, we have 2.5 hours to get the scene, and I've got 7 shots here, and I need 4. I need to do it in 4. Let's talk, and we work it out very quickly, and then we have a new shot list now, and we go. So it is very, if you are expecting that you're going to be the person who's going to get on set and you know, suddenly now you're thrown into a location you've never been before, and you have to very quickly come up with, I need this shot, this shot, this shot, this shot, without having done any preparation at all. You're going to fall on your face, quite frankly. It's going to happen. It may not happen in the first scene or at some point. If you haven't prepared and you show up and you try to do it on the fly, you may be able to get away with it some of the time, but eventually you're going to fall on your face. And so doing that prep work, even if you end up throwing that shot list out the window, is really important, because you've worked through it. You've gone through that scene and you've figured out where those key beats are in the scene, and you figure out what you need from that scene to propel that story, and what you need from those actors to propel that story. And if you haven't done that preliminary preparation, good luck. That's all I have to say. You're going to need it.
You know, something that it would be interesting to hear you speak about. In my own experience, you know, I've discovered that a lot of the factors of how successful I am and how effective and efficient I am on a job, and also, you know, my likelihood for getting hired back by a client has to do with the people I surround myself with, my team, my crew. You know, I always like to say that wherever possible, I like to hire people who know more about their jobs and have more experience in their jobs than I do. And it's funny because I've met some people who are kind of control freaks, and they want to feel like they're the know-it-all on set. But I'm kind of the opposite. I want to surround myself with the experts. And so I know, you know, you've worked with people who were neophytes and students, you know, obviously trying their best, but not knowledgeable or experienced. And then you've also worked with some really excellent people, both in terms of cast and crew. You know, can you speak a little bit about, you know, the difference between, you know, hiring an actor or a collaborator that's you know, really professional and experienced and a good collaborator, as opposed to someone who might be a little bit more of a headache?
Well, okay, so I'm going to put it this way. Just because sometimes a person, when they're very experienced and isn't always the best person to work with if you're the director. Because then that person comes in with the air of, I know more than you do, and I'm going to make sure everybody on the set knows it, right? So that's when you as the director have to really assert yourself and your vision and say, yes, I know, I get it. You know what you're doing. You're very experienced. You know, you're, you know, God's gift to whatever position you're working in. But this is still my movie, and this is my vision, and you're here to serve that vision, not me serving your whatever, you know, ego. So there are going to be those times, and I've had to do that, unfortunately, on sets. And, you know, but for the most part, my experience with when in the situation where I'm the producer and I get to hire the crew and I get to determine who my key, like that's not always the case, by the way. Like there's more often than not, I'm being hired as a director to come in on a set where I don't have control over who gets hired. I don't have a control over who my DP is. I don't have control over who my hair makeup person is. I don't have control over wardrobe. They're the, you know, they're the established crew for this production company, and that's who I have to work with, right? And so you're the guest as the director. And that's actually the like 100% of the time the situation. Well, okay, say 95% of the time, the situation, if you're directing television, if you're an episodic director, you're the guest. All those crew people and cast, they all work together all day, every day for the whole season. You're coming in and doing 1 or 2 episodes, and that's it. So you're the guest. So you really have to get in there and, well, first of all, you have to really do your preparation work to make sure that you understand how to approach your work in a way that meshes with the established look and established, look and tempo and tone of that show, right? But if it's your production, so say it's one of my movies, my Lifetime movies, and I'm producing it, I'm shooting it here in Houston and I'm producing it, then, which I've only done twice, by the way, then you have a lot more control over who you hire, and you can hire people that you know and trust, that you know you're going to work well with, and that you're, that are going to, gel, that are just going to work well together. And I have had those crews where I've had like a dream team, people who I really, really, truly love working with. And I was so fortunate that they were available and able and willing to work on the budget that we had.
Yeah.
And it just made the process, like, I didn't worry about, things the lighting being set up correctly, or the wardrobe or that stuff, because I knew I had a good team and they understood what I was going for and they delivered what I was asking for. Not to say the production didn't have other problems, but in that realm, when it came to my crew, I had no issues. We were a machine.
And that gave you more time and space to focus on what your responsibilities as a director were.
Well, yes, in theory, yes. Unfortunately, I had to focus on some other nonsense, but that came up, as you well know. But ultimately, yes, in the ideal world, when you have a crew that you are familiar with, that you trust, and that they're doing everything they can to give you what you're looking for as the director, and you start working like a machine, that makes it easier for me as the director to really focus what I'm supposed to be focusing on, which is my actors.
Yeah.
And making sure I'm getting the performance from them, because they are my responsibility, right? The lighting is Brad's responsibility. The sound is the sound guy's the sound recorder's responsibility. The wardrobe is wardrobe's responsibility. Yes, I have to make decisions to help them do their job, but ultimately that's their responsibility to deliver what I'm asking for, right? Yeah. But when it comes to the actor, they're my responsibility. So I have to. If I have a crew that I know that I trust is going to, work professionally, they're experienced, and they really understand what their job is when they get on that set, that makes my job easier. And then I can focus on the actors.
So speaking of the actors, how about, from that point of view, as opposed to, with respect to, hiring the right cast, finding the people who not only are going to be able to bring to life the character as you see them, but are also going to have good chemistry with the other people in the ensemble. Not only the experience of working with people who are really good, or even people who bring another level than even beyond what you expected. Tell us a little bit about that, and also, how do you get that in the audition process? How do you find those people? Both from a perspective of a director, but also some of the people in the group are actors. What should they look to bring to their performances and their skills, so that when you see them, you'll think, that's the person I want to cast.
Right. It's casting is a somewhat complicated process. It really just depends on the project itself. I mean, like, if I'm doing my Lifetime movies, then I'm basically sent a list of at least for my key roles, like the top 2 or 3 roles in the film. I'm sent a list of like 40 actors that Lifetime has already pre-approved. And then I just do it's all offers only. So I'm not auditioning them. I'm just saying, oh, okay, well, she looks like the part. I can see her in this part. I've seen her work before. You go and you do your research. You find out what else they've been in, because they're all actresses that are established. They're actresses who are experienced, so it's not hard to find their work. And you go do your research and you find out. You just look at other projects that they've been in, whether it's TV series or movies, and you just sort of watch their work and just get. There's just something in you as a director where you're like, okay, I see something here. I see something here that I can work with. I see something here that really that I'm connecting with, that I feel like could that they could really, that would really benefit this role, that I'm casting for. So that's basically how you do that. When I'm actually auditioning actors, unfortunately in this day and age, it's becoming much more, of course, in this day and age of COVID, especially, it's becoming basically the standard to audition actors, at least in the first round of auditions, through self-tapes. I'm not a big fan of self-tapes for a number of reasons, but largely because I want to be in the room with the actor because I can feel, if I could feel their performance, I want to be able to feel their performance. Now there are actors who can make me feel their performance through, through self-taping, but it's more rare than if you're in a room with them, right? And by the way, I do the same thing when I'm on set. When I'm on set, I typically am not sitting at Video Village. I'm usually standing right next to the camera, usually by the focus puller, and I'll like maybe glance down at his framing just to make sure that the framing's what I want. But then once I've checked the framing on the focus puller's monitor and said, okay, that's it. And from that point on, I'm only focused on the actor, only looking at them. And so there's a feeling that you get whenever you're watching someone, in their audition or in their performance, that if you connect with them, you know that they're going to be able to connect with an audience. So, but when you're self-taping, there's an issue with sometimes cameras are messed up. There's technology you're having to deal with. The lighting's weird. The sound's weird. It's all kinds of stuff that could, unfortunately, so I guess my recommendation to the actors here is get a really great like camera setup and with one of those like nice lights, to really, so you don't have to worry about lighting and make sure your sound is good so that the director can hear you. And then once I've gone through all of those tapes, then I'll pick, I don't know, anywhere between 8 to 20 actors, not 20, that's too many, like 8 to 12 actors who on that self-tape, I felt like, they could work for that role. And then we do the in-person callbacks. We do callbacks and we do those in person. And if it's just like a one-liner role, then I don't do callbacks in person. If it's a one-liner and I felt like they did a good job on the self-tape that they did, then I'll cast them off of that. But if they're like a major supporting character, then I typically will do callbacks and meet with them in person and try to get that in-room, sort of sense about them, in the room sense about them that you just, don't always get from self-taping, right? And that's, did I answer your question?
Yep, thank you. So I want to leave a little bit of time for Q&A because I'm sure people have a lot of questions. But before we get there, I'd love to at least briefly touch on, distribution and then advocacy. Just if you, want to say a little bit about your involvement in those two things.
Sure. So distribution. So in 2016, so I mentioned to you that the company that sold my first movie to Lifetime was a company called Imagination Worldwide, and Pierre David was at that time the CEO, and Larry David was the president. Well, about a year or so after they sold Preacher's Daughter to Lifetime, Pierre left the company, sold it to Larry, and then Larry was trying to, run the company on his own. And unfortunately, the company had was struggling financially, predominantly because their bread and butter, like a vast majority of their income, and they were a very successful company, by the way, but a vast majority of their income was coming from home video sales, worldwide home video sales, DVDs, and that aspect of the market was disappearing, going away very, very quickly. So quickly, and it was going away so quickly that the digital marketplace, like Netflix's and all the digital platforms, were not bringing enough revenue to the company to replace the lost revenue from DVDs. So there was a period of time between the tanking of the home video market and the rise of the digital marketplace, where there was just very little, that digital marketplace was not replenishing the lost income from the DVD, the home video marketplace, right? And that's kind of where the company was at that point in time. So I came in 2016, I bought the company, and we decided to shift away, obviously away from home video, but we wanted to really focus on finding content and building our network of VOD, predominantly VOD buyers. and because everything was
VOD for people who don't know.
Oh, video on demand. So there's different types of video on demand. There's TVOD, transactional video on demand. That's like if you rent or buy a movie on Xfinity or iTunes, or where you actually have to purchase the movie or purchase the rental of the movie. So there's a transaction that takes place, right? Per viewing, right? So that's TVOD, transactional VOD. And then there's SVOD, which is subscription VOD or streaming VOD, which would be like Netflix or Hulu, or where you pay a monthly subscription fee, and then with that fee, you're able to watch the movie. So that's another form of VOD, video on demand, but it's through streaming platforms, or through like Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime. Although Amazon Prime can also be TVOD because you can rent and buy movies there too. And then there's now AVOD, which is ad-driven VOD. There's PVOD now, where you pay to watch a first run. Well, an example would be like Mulan, which is a brand new release exclusively to digital platform, and you have to pay a premium price to pay to view that. So it's called PVOD. So there's different kind of VODs that are out there. My company is very, most of our buyers are in one of those spaces. So predominantly right now, SVOD and AVOD. So although there is some TVOD as well, quite a bit of TVOD as well, but we haven't gotten into the PVOD yet. We hope to at some point, but we're not quite there yet. Anyway, so that's what we do. I go to film markets all over the world, including Cannes. We're in Toronto. Toronto starts this week. We have, although it's technically not a market, it's a film festival, but there's a lot of business, deals that happen there, a lot of sales that happen there. So we call it a market. The AFM, the American Film Market, which is happening in November. European Film Market, EFM, which is in Berlin during the Berlinale Film Festival, and that's in February. And MIPCOM is another one, MIP TV, Film Art. Let's see, there's a ton of film markets out there. I don't go to all of them. I go to certain key markets, but my company is represented at all of them.
And for a reference, how many titles do you typically market each time you do this?
For each market, we try to bring 5 or 6 new titles per market. So we're not we're a very small boutique company. We are not, A24. We are not Lionsgate. We're not, one of these big, huge, deep-pocketed distribution companies. We tend to find small films that are, very, a lot of them are genre, they're horror, thriller, occasionally we'll get a documentary. Occasionally we'll get, we're actually now doing series. We just picked up a couple of new series. So we're now selling series worldwide, but we take these projects, these films or series to the market, and we sell them to buyers in other countries.
How do you typically discover them? How do you become aware of these projects?
There's a number of ways. A lot of times they're just straight up submissions where the producers send us the film. They send us an email saying, hey, we have this film we'd like you to look at. And, so it's a basic email inquiry. And sometimes we find films through film festivals. We found one of our first films that we distributed was a film called The Light of the Moon, that stars Stephanie Beatrice, who some of you may know from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, plays Officer Diaz on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. We distributed that film in 2017. We picked that one up out of South by Southwest. We also picked up a film that year called Like Me out of South by Southwest. Although we only had international rights, we didn't distribute it. We just were a sales rep internationally. And then we distributed a feature film directed by Amber Tamlin, her directorial debut, called Paint It Black. Also, that was in 2017. We've been sales rep on films starring Kaylee Cuoco, Molly Shannon. We're sales rep on a film called Wild Nights with Emily, about Emily Dickinson's secret illicit affair with her sister-in-law, which was pretty awesome.
Oh, wow.
And actually historically accurate.
I want to see this.
Yes, but it's a comedy, and it stars Molly Shannon as Emily Dickinson, and it's literally the funniest freaking Emily Dickinson movie you will ever see,
Wow.
hands down. It's hilarious. You can watch it now. I think it's on, I want to say Netflix, but
Okay.
for sure on Amazon. So check it out. But again, we were just handling international sales in that film. So we pick up films that are just interesting films. Most of the films are female driven, very female driven narratives, because I'm a woman and those are the films that interest me. Right. That's why we need more women owning companies and making decisions in Hollywood, because we pick up films and we represent films that we like, right? That tell stories we're interested in, right? So yeah, that's.
So I'd love to touch briefly on advocacy, and I'd like to include in that terminology everything from the types of things that Swamp does, but also representing or amplifying the voices of female filmmakers and other diverse communities, diverse underrepresented communities, and then also in terms of your work, lobbying the Texas legislature. To me, all of that is different forms of advocacy, and I know you're incredibly active. I'd love to hear a little bit about, your experiences and the importance of those things.
Sure. So as mentioned earlier, I worked for 8 years for a nonprofit media arts organization called Southwest Alternate Media Project, SWAMP. And a part of our mission, our actual mission of the organization, was to provide opportunities for filmmakers from multicultural communities. So diverse multicultural storytellers, right? And so being a part of SWAMP and working in that space inherently meant that I was a part of trying to bring those marginalized storytellers' stories to the forefront, right? Whether it be through, a grant from SWAMP, whether it be through educational opportunities, whether it be through, whatever resources that SWAMP could provide, right? And so we were very, very focused on making sure that our constituency, the people who were coming to SWAMP, who were benefiting from, SWAMP produced a TV series, for example, for 30 plus years. It was on PBS, which was a showcase of short films. And a part of the mandate on the programming of those short films was to program films that were made by persons of color, featuring casts of, who are predominantly persons of color. That was a part of our mission from the very beginning, going back, to the 1970s. Our founding father of SWAMP was a documentary filmmaker named James Blue, who was largely known for for his documentary film, his historic documentary film called The March, which was about the March on Washington, and Martin Luther King's March on Washington. He was a white male, cis male filmmaker, but he even understood back in the 60s the importance of getting these stories out there. And he was a very huge advocate of citizen filmmaking, where anybody could pick up a camera and go out and tell their stories. And that was his passion, was helping filmmakers from all backgrounds, all, races, religions, didn't matter. He wanted to put a camera in their hand and get them to tell a story. So his mission became my mission, because I was very much sort of like followed in his footsteps, working for SWAMP. I understood James Blue's, mission of trying to provide resources for marginalized, filmmakers from marginalized communities. And that became my focus as well, that was SWAMP's focus, and I worked for SWAMP. So that was just part of my job, right? And so one of the things that I did when I was working for SWAMP was I taught after-school filmmaking classes in schools that are considered, how do they describe it? They're Title I schools, where 90% of the students are on assisted lunch program. And so I would go to these schools every day. Well, actually not every day, 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday after school. And I would teach students at these schools filmmaking. When we'd make little horror films, or we made a documentary once that won a ton of student film awards, which was a documentary about the after school program. It was a very simple documentary. We made a documentary about the after school program, of which this class was part of, right? And interviewed some of the instructors in the after school program. We interviewed the principal. We interviewed the woman who ran the program, ran the after school program. We interviewed the students, and some were dance. So this, so we put the camera in the hands of the students and let them tell their own stories, which was what Swamp was all about, 100%. And we were really proud of that project. And so anyway, it's, so I guess that was always a part of my experience as a filmmaker, when I was sort of coming into my own as a filmmaker, was understanding that I was a part of a community, and that community needed more stories from filmmakers from, those marginalized communities, right? And so once I became successful on my own as a filmmaker, I never forget it. My first movie, The Preacher's Daughter, which was set in East Texas, all white people. Everybody in that film was white. And I never forget it, because we did this premiere at River Oaks Theater, and 500 plus people came to watch this filming. There was a line going down all the way down. Christina could tell you. And I was just blown away by the community, coming out to support my movie. It just blew me away. And I never forget, there was one person who was at the screening who knew my work was Swamp, and came afterwards and said, I really loved your film. I think you did a really good job, but I have one complaint. There's too many white people in this movie. And I'm like, yep, you're 1,000% right. There are, way too many white people in this movie. And we should have, I should have figured out how to tell a story in a way where I could cast, people from, different backgrounds. And so when I made my second movie, I, was trying to be more, inclusive in my casting and in, crew, and hiring my crew as well. But really by my third movie, when I made my third movie, that was the first time where I could really cast a major character. This was for Lifetime. A major character who was a person of color. And I was actually really nervous whenever I pitched it to them, thinking there's no way they're going to go for this. And to Lifetime's credit, they're like, we love it. We think it's great. We want more, we want more inclusivity in our films as well. So they let me do it. And so now the project that I'm developing with Lifetime now, that's kind of a mandate now. Now the mandate is you must have diversity in your stories. Yeah. So it's been interesting to kind of to be a part of like that, as a filmmaker, to be a part of seeing that paradigm shift away from like when I first started out, where it was very much like, we were, I don't know why, we just were casting white people, and everything. And then even though I knew I should be, I had worked with, these, it still was ingrained in me, I guess. I don't know.
Yep.
And that's to my, that was to my shame, and when someone actually called me out on it, I'm like, holy crap, you're right. I totally I should have been more proactive about making sure that our cast especially had, was reflective of Houston, because that's where it was set. And so going through that sort of that to where now I'm actually being told, no, you must have diversity. It's awesome.
That's terrific. Well, it's a good reminder that, especially you being somebody who's championing, stories about empowered women and focusing on, women's points of view, that you could still have a blind spot. And I think it's a good reminder to all of us, to look for those blind spots and address them.
And it's not just blind spots in your cast, it's also in your crew. Like when I made my most recent movie called The Never List, which we shot in California and Los Angeles, one of the things that I was very, very focused on at that point in time was because I ran a distribution company that was, part of my company's, mission was to promote female storytellers, promote female directors, part of the distribution company. So me as a female director, I'm like, okay, well, I need to like support women behind the camera as much as in front of the camera. So our entire cast and crew of the Never List was 70% female or female identifying crew people and cast. So we're being proactive about it now. It's not just oh, I forgot, or oh, I didn't think of it, or no, that's not an excuse anymore.
Yeah.
It wasn't even, honestly, it wasn't even an excuse then.
Yeah.
You know, now we are being a lot more, you know, taking personal responsibility and saying, okay, we have to make the change. We have to be the change that this industry needs. And so we have to support. My entire camera crew on the Never List were women. The entire camera crew. You know, so you know, something I'm really proud of. You know, I'm proud that we did that, but, you know, but it's, you know, I shouldn't be proud. This should be just a duh, you know, this is the way it be, you know? So, but, you know, I'm still proud.
So before we hand it over to everybody with questions, I'd also like to touch just really quickly on advocacy in the form of what you do with respect to trying to bring opportunities and, you know, filmmaking business to Houston, to Texas, and your interaction with, you know, community leaders and the legislature in Austin.
Right. Okay. So, so back in, oh gosh, what was it? 2006, 2007. I was part of a statewide initiative. A whole bunch of filmmakers from all over the state of Texas converged on Austin and had this big sort of like industry-wide initiative that we developed where we would start a industry advocacy group called the Texas Motion Picture Alliance, the TXMPA. And the TXMPA became a 501c6 organization where they lobby on behalf of the film industry in Texas. And a big part of their lobbying effort is incentives, trying they're the organization that fought for and successfully got film incentives passed in the state of Texas, and have been working every 2 years when the legislature meets to keep those film incentives alive and funded. Because it's not just about, you know, making sure that we have incentives, it's also making sure that that there's a budget for the incentives to pay for the incentives, right? And some years we've had some lean years with our budgets, and we've had some not so lean years. We've had some really good years with our budget that was appropriated towards the incentive programs. So every 2 years, almost invariably, you'll find me at the state capitol, you know, knocking on the doors of our state legislators, some of them from Houston, some of them from outside of Houston. And we'll go in there, we'll take meetings with them, and we'll sit down and talk to them about what we do. You know, I'll explain to them, you know, that I'm a filmmaker, that I live in Houston, and that I make movies for Lifetime. And I want to make more movies here in Houston and here in Texas. And in order to do so, I need better incentives. So, and it's not just me, it's a bunch of filmmakers and a bunch of industry professionals who go do this. So we literally walk the halls of the state capitol, meeting with not the legislators themselves. Usually it's their representatives, you know, their secretaries or their policy advisors, people like that. And we're laying out a case for why our state needs film incentives and the value of our industry on our state's economy. And so it's very much just really getting those legislators to recognize the film industry as a viable industry that brings real money to our state, real revenue to our state. That's the main focus of that advocacy effort. So I'm sure I'll be there next year when the state legislature meets again. So it's I didn't go last year because they had a little bit of a switch up with the you know, how they did their advocacy efforts. I was fully prepared to go and walk those halls and take those meetings, but they were sort of approaching our incentive the budget for our incentive a little bit differently, which didn't require me to go to those meetings. So I'm not sure how they're going to do it next year, but if they need me, I'm there. You know, I'm always there doing what I need to do to keep the film industry in Texas alive. And we need you.
Yeah.
The film industry needs your voices. They need you to go out and let your personal representatives know that you are a working professional or want to be a working professional in the film industry in the state of Texas, and that you as a constituent of theirs, that you need their help, you need their support by supporting film incentives in the state of Texas. So as we get closer to our legislative session, then maybe we can have a more targeted discussion on that. But it's really important for you to all be actively engaged in lobbying for your industry here in the state with your state legislature, especially with your own representatives. But if you can, even, you know, legislators who aren't your representatives, because they need to hear from us, and they need to know that there is a viable industry here and that we need their support. So, and then was there anything else?
No, terrific. Thank you. So everybody, I put in the chat, I put the website for TXMPA, and I also put the website for SWAMP. You know, check them out. Consider joining. You know, they always say it takes money to make money, and there's a lot of expenses in this business. You know, once you move along in your careers, you'll be joining the union, you'll be joining professional organizations, you know, and those typically cost, you know, several hundred to a few $1,000s a year. Correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, but I think TXMPA and SWAMP are both only about $50 a year.
I think TXMPA is more. Yeah, SWAMP is $50 a year to join. And with that, you get discounts to all of our film screenings, to film events, to our workshops. We do a lot of workshops throughout the year. And you're supporting an organization that supports, you know, your local film industry, your local film community.
And supports you as a Texas filmmaker. You know, these are the organizations that advocate for you to have opportunities in the business. So, you know, something to consider. So
yeah,
I'd like to...
In the past, they've also given like discounts to, you know, for equipment rental, things like that. If you're a member, you can go to like certain vendors here in Houston and get a discount on your equipment rental, that kind of stuff. So there's benefits beyond, you know, so, and $50 a year really isn't that much when you think of it in the, you know, in terms of, you know, supporting, you know, yourself. Quite frankly, you're supporting yourself as a filmmaker, your own film community, because the stronger your film community is, the better chance you have of success in that community as a filmmaker.
So I'd like to go ahead and open this up to questions. I've got 4 people that I can't see, but, you know, just so I know if I need to moderate the questions, raise your hand if you've got a question. Okay, I got 2 people. Let's start with Sarita. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Awesome. Michelle, I actually have 2 questions for you. Well, I want to start by saying I like your blue nail polish.
Oh, thank you. I just had it done. It's actually starting to chip now, but yeah, it's
cool though. I like unique colors. But anyway, so my first question, just kind of going back to like when you, way back at the beginning of when you started talking, you referenced the fact that you made your money back from Lifetime. Just the expenses that you put in, you ended up making that money back. But you said that it was unusual to make your money back. And I was just wondering, why is that unusual, and what's the alternative?
That's a really good question. So how do I put this? So the independent film marketplace is very much driven by name talent, by stars, right? And it's very difficult for smaller indie films, especially, you know, with the budgets that I was working with and still work with, quite frankly, it's really hard for small budget films to hire the kind of name talent that sells movies in any meaningful way, that really bring in, we call them bankable talent, talent that are really going to, are going to make money for that movie.
If I can interject real quick, when
Sure.
Michelle mentioned that list that Lifetime gave her, that's exactly what that is.
Yeah. So I just got really lucky with my first movie in that I was able to get these, how do I put this? We did auditions out in Los Angeles, and we sent out through Actors Access Breakdown Services the sites to the to the film for the actors, as you do, and we had some actors who showed up to audition who were famous. I didn't, and one of them was somebody that I didn't know who she was, but she was one of the stars, like name in the opening credits stars of Desperate Housewives, and I didn't know it because I didn't watch Desperate Housewives. I didn't then anyway. I've since watched it, and she was by far the best audition I had between Houston, Austin, Dallas, everywhere that we had auditioned. She was the best, absolutely the best. And I'm so glad I was in that we didn't have self-tape back then, because I mean, maybe we did, but it wasn't as common as it is now, because being in that room with her, like I was holding my breath the whole time she was performing because it was so good. And when she was done and walked, she thanked me for the opportunity. She left. I like this, all this like air that I'd been holding in because her performance was so good, just came out. I was like, oh my God, that was so, she's it. I'm like, I mean, and there was a couple of young women who were interns who were working with me. They both were students at USC, and they were interning with me to help me with the auditions. And the one who I had running the camera said, and after I, sort of like went this whole like, oh my gosh, she was so good, and she goes, well, you know who that is, right? And I'm like, no, is she famous? And she's like, yeah, she's on Desperate Housewives. Like, she has a pretty major role. I'm like, what? Like, I can't afford her. Why did she waste my time coming to my audition? Like, why did she, like, then I was like, just literally, like, heartbroken, because I'm like, my budget is, she makes more in probably one episode of Desperate Housewives than my entire budget. Like, there's no way she's going to do this, right? There's no way. And then I was heartbroken because then I'm like, she's never going to accept me. I'm not even going to bother like talking to her agent about doing it because, and that was my ego again, as my ego saying, you can't, right? And quite frankly, like the next day while I was at the airport, I was going through my headshots and all my auditions, and I had my yes stack and my no stack, and I got to her headshot and I'm like, and I put it in the no stack because I knew that she was going to say no. Like, I assumed she was going to say no because of our budget, and wasn't even going to reach out to her, quite frankly. That was on a Sunday. On Monday, I'm back here in Houston and, planning to, start, reaching out to, working with my casting director to go through all the auditions that we had taped. And I get a call from my casting director saying that Andrea's agent was trying to reach me and that they had called her, and she told them to go ahead and call me directly. And she said, answer your phone. Okay. So they called, I answered my phone, and the agent was very polite and said, we just wanted to get feedback on Andrea Bowen's audition. And I said, well, I'm just gonna be straight up with you. Like, she was the best, hands down, the best. And they're like, oh, that's really great to hear. So is she in the mix? And I'm like, well, here's the thing. This is my budget. This is my budget. And it's like crickets. I didn't hear anything. And then after sort of a deep breath, they're like, well, go ahead and send us the screenplay because she's interested. And I'm like, okay, I'll send it to her. So I sent them the screenplay thinking, okay, she's going to read this and be like, there's no way I'm doing that for that amount of money for scale, and I'm not saying she worked for scale. I'm just saying, that's what we had budgeted for. But there's no way I'm doing that for that amount of money. Because there was some tough stuff. There's nudity. There was, drug use, all kinds of crazy stuff happening in this movie. And so she, to her credit, she emailed me about a week or so later and said that she read the script and she loved it and she wanted to be considered for the part. And so that's that decision right there. I went out and I met with her because I wanted to make sure she understood fully what she was getting into, because I didn't want her to be like, you know, thinking that she was going to show up to our set and it was going to be like Desperate Housewives set, right? We had no money. It was going to be like, and so, you know, I had a very frank conversation with her about the kind of movie that we were going to be making and how, you know, because of our budget, you know, we had to do a lot of things that she's not used to, right? You know, there was going to be it's going to be very different than the type of sets that she was used to. And she was, you know, basically said, I want to do it. I want to, you know, I love this role. I really want to do it. And so that decision, you know I kind of took a little tangent there just to get around to the point of this was, don't assume anything. If an actor, you know, just because an actor's famous, that they won't want to do your script, even if you don't have the budget that they're accustomed to. So that's a big lesson we should all learn. But also, her being in the film is what sold the movie to Lifetime, because she'd done a year before that a movie where she played a young woman who had AIDS, who got HIV, right? And that movie was very popular. So Lifetime knew that Andrea was going to be someone that their audiences would watch, right? So she was already kind of a known entity for them. And she, not only that, they were looking for certain content that would, so anyway, all the pieces for Lifetime fit. So that's the only way we were able to make our money back on that movie, was we had a product that Lifetime could make money on, that they knew that they could get out and that a lot of people would watch, because they'd already released a film with Andrea in it that a lot of people watched, right? And I got really lucky that I had Andrea, and that's why I went through that whole casting conversation when you were asking me about making money, because it really does matter who you cast. Unfortunately, you know, it's just the case. I mean, it's just the case, you know. Having a well-known actor in the film is going to help me as your film salesperson or distributor make your money back. And let's be honest, even if you did have a big name in your film, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make your money back, right? Because there are a lot of movies with famous people in them that don't make their money back. So the realities of our industry is that it's really hard to make money on movies. It's even harder when you don't have talent in it that's going to help sell that movie. And so for me to be able to make my first movie, to sell it and to make my money back on the first deal, very rare.
Gotcha.
I'd like to amplify Michelle's anecdote just by telling you something quickly. I worked on a movie in Texas in 2007 called Cook County. And we shot up in Cleveland and a little bit in Houston. And the director, you know, was very smart about his casting, and he also cast some people out of LA. And one of our actors was a guy named Anson Mount, who you may know was one of the actors on Star Trek Discovery last year, and a few years prior he had a series called Hellraiser.
Hell on Wheels.
Pardon? Not Hellraiser, sorry, Hell on Wheels.
Hell on Wheels, yeah.
Hell on Wheels, sorry. And then we also had an actor named Xander Berkeley, who prior to working with us had been in Air Force One, he'd been in Terminator 2, he'd been in all these huge movies, but his attraction was that, you know, first of all, this was a lead role, you know, and also it was exploring a character that to him as an artist was a challenge. It was a challenge he wanted to take on. And in talking to Michelle, I think you had told me previously that this particular role actually appealed to Andrea. It was something new for her, right?
Yeah, that's right. She was only being offered roles because of her work on Desperate Housewives. She was only being offered roles as the smart daughter, the smart best friend, the smart, you know, because she comes off as being really smart because she is really smart. Let's be honest, she's super smart. And she's also very just fantastic. She's a smart actress. She's just a smart person. She's just, brilliant. Um, and she didn't want to play smart. She wanted to play a character who maybe didn't always make the best decisions for herself, and who was a more like real, well-rounded person, more three-dimensional than just the smart whatever girlfriend or the smart best friend or whatever it was that she was being offered, right? And this gave her a chance to play a role that she was not being offered and in Hollywood.
So, that's a good point. And, this is true for actors. It's also true for DPs and directors and writers. This is a business where you will get hired to do what people can see you've already done well before.
Right.
And it's really easy to get pigeonholed into being, the person who does that one thing. And a lot of times, if you want to break that, you have to go out on a limb, with through your own power, create something that you can demonstrate that, hey, look at me in a new light. And that's what Xander had done. And what I wanted to say also about Xander is that he and I became friends. And years later, a friend of mine who was a costume designer named Candice Carella, she and I used to do a lot of the big music videos together. And she came up with this story and decided that she'd like to direct this story. And the crux of it was this kind of burned out rock star had to look after his niece for a weekend, his little niece for a weekend. And in doing so, he kind of bonded and discovered, how inspiring this child was. And we were talking about this short, which literally had no money. I mean, she was doing it herself. Everybody was working for free. And I kept thinking, this rock star, I'm like, in a dream world, I could see Xander playing that role. And I pitched that to Candice. I said, Candice, what do you think about me reaching out to him? Now bear in mind, this is a guy who's had recurring roles on Salem, on The Walking Dead. I mean, this guy is a working actor. He's out there doing movies. He's out there doing television. But I pitched it to him, and to keep the story short, he was interested. He accepted. The attraction to him was it was a very different role for him, and he had 2 little daughters, and he really wanted to show that bonding. And he worked for free. They did, I don't know, SAG deferred or SAG. I don't know. It was SAG because they were all SAG actors, but there's some kind of tier with SAG that you can do that. But anyway, the point being is that don't be afraid, to shoot for the stars with casting, because, you may have something that somebody just really wants to do. And, so just consider that. And the other thing is to amplify what Michelle had said when she was talking about getting into the business and her network. Candice got Xander because she knew me, because I had worked on that movie. So for so many reasons, your success in this business as a filmmaker is contingent upon you being active in that community and making the connections and making friends, proving yourself, being of value, demonstrating that you can, either bring money to the people or be an asset in some way such that you make their lives and job easier. And so you had a second question, Sarita?
I did, but I want to make sure that, because I think is it
okay?
Katya?
You want to go ahead and ask your question?
Okay. The second question was, you were referring to, like, for example, if you go to a set and you have never been there before, so you have to like redo your shot list and the things like that. You referred to specifically like saying you might like meet with your cinematographer and your AD and kind of just talk about how you could redo your shot list. But you also mentioned that you would have like other key department heads there as well, as far as like helping you make the decisions on what your new shot list would be. I was just wondering who you would, and maybe I just misunderstood how you said it.
Yeah, it would basically be my DP and my first AD.
Right, okay.
We'll go find a little corner. We'll, kind of look at it and we'll say, okay, how can we shoot this in 4 shots versus 7? Or how can we, let's just sort of brainstorm here. And I listen to them and, this is what I'm going for. This is the key things that I really need to, make sure that we get. and and the DP and I usually, if I can, like, and I have been given this opportunity before, if I can go pre-scout the locations with just me and the DP, then we can usually put together a very solid shot list, and then we just knock it out when we get there, right? Because we already know exactly what we need to film. We've already gone through everything during our tech scout with the rest of the department heads, and everybody knows exactly when they get to that set what needs to take place, right? But sometimes I don't get that opportunity to go to. Sometimes I show up to locations sight unseen, and I just have to figure out like how to get this scene knocked out, right, as quickly as possible, or as with as much, and making sure that we have all the beats covered, and that we've got the scene now.
Whenever possible, I recommend scouting, especially as the DP.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's just so many things, not only as a director, but for the electrical crew to determine where powering is, for the DP to figure out where they can put lights. Do they need special equipment to rig to something in the ceiling? So important. And the other thing I would throw out real quick in terms of me as a DP being an asset to a director in a situation like that, I'm very experienced with editing. And I know Michelle is too. And I recommend, for any filmmaker to know editing, because if you know editing, when that question comes up, how do we turn 7 shots into 4? You're going to have a really good ability to answer that. And not only that, when you're in the middle of a scene and you're shooting, you may, as you're cutting it together in your mind, you may be like, for instance, I may say to Michelle, I think we should get an insert of that clock. I think you may want that, or an insert of that person picking up that glass. So just a quick thought. Katja, you had a question?
Yes. Michelle, how old were you when you made your first feature, and where can I see it?
Okay, so I was, let's see, what would have been 2010? So I would have been 38.
Okay.
38 years old when I made my first feature, which was in 2010, so 10 years ago. So now you know how old I am. But also that, there's a lot of women who were directors who were older than I am getting their first. I mean, look at Lynn Shelton, who were very successful filmmakers at later, like what by the industry standards later in, their career, later in life. It was just, for me, it was timing, because like I was making short films, I was working for Swamp, and I just, like I said, I was writing the script off and on for like 9 years, and finally decided to, once I got into the Austin Film Festival, then I ran out of excuses. I mean, I came up with every excuse in the book to not make that movie. It was too big of a risk. I didn't have enough money. It was blah, 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 came up with every excuse in the book. And then when it got into Austin Film Festival, and that guy, the producer, was like, you've got to come out and take meetings. Once I got to that point, then it was just like, you have to do it. You just have to bite the bullet and get this movie made. Mm-hmm. And it's now or never. It really was. It really felt like that. It's like, do it now, or you're just never going to do it. You have to make a decision. Are you going to make this feature film, or are you not?
So I've got a comment from Sabrina that she's got a question. And I think, did I interrupt you, Michelle?
No, it's okay.
Where can I see the movie, Michelle?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's on Amazon. I think you can find it on Amazon Prime. Okay. I think so. Just Google The Preacher's Daughter movie. I want to say it's on Amazon. I want to say it's probably on Redbox on their online streaming. I think there. I'll have to go back and look. It's in the number. Before I bought the company, those rights were sold off to a different company, so I don't actually have the rights to the movie, the digital rights. So I'll have to go back and look, but I'm pretty sure it's on Amazon.
Okay.
So Michelle, can we go to 7:30? Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you've got a question, rather than raising your hand because I can't see some of you, type in the chat that you've got a question, and I'll put you in the queue, and then I'll go in order of whoever's got a question. But right now I've got Sabrina's got one.
Hey, Sabrina.
Yes. Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for telling us your experience and journey. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So my question is kind of a two-parter. One of them was, as a producer, how much would you say, like when you're hiring a director, their body of work, like do you look for someone who's been experienced for multiple years, or do you just, like, let's say if you see maybe 2 or 3 of their projects, do you feel like that's the right choice? Or, like, I guess my question in all with that is how much of that plays into hiring someone for a project, their past history, their body of work.
So I'll be straight up with you and say that I've never actually hired a director. Because I'm a writer director who produces because I have to. I don't aspire to be a big producer. I don't produce other people's. I mean, I have produced other people's films, but generally speaking, like I produce projects that I'm directing, and so not to say that I wouldn't produce somebody else's film, but in the past, when I have produced a film that I did not direct, it was because of the story. Like the director came to me, they had written a screenplay that I truly, truly loved and felt like, because look, making movies is hard as hell. It is hard. It is not easy. It is not for the weary. It is very difficult. And in some ways, working on a film is like a marriage with the other producers, with the director. It's very much like you're tied to them. Like, and you want to be very cautious about who you tie yourself to, right? Or what's the old term, who you get in bed with? Yeah, it's not an appropriate term anymore, but but you get the idea. So for me, it's like, if I'm going to produce somebody else's film, that they're directing, I really have to believe in that story, love the story, and I have to believe that that director is capable of communicating their vision and getting that vision onto the screen. And that requires, I take a look at their past work, and I talk to people, and now I talk to people to people that they've worked with in the past. I'll go and talk to some of their other producers, and I'll talk to some of the people, their DP. I'll talk to, I'll do my research, and ultimately, I think that if I were a producer where I had a project that I was hiring a director, I would do the same thing. I would say, okay, we have a really great script here. Who is the best person to direct this movie? Like, who's the best person, who can take the story I'm seeing on this page and get it to the screen, right? And, I mean, like, I'm not going to hire certain directors who were more, drama, who do more dramas to direct a movie that's, comedy. You want a comedy director. You want someone who has experience as a comedy directing comedy, right? Exactly. And vice versa. Like, you have someone who's a comedy director. I'm sure they can probably direct drama too. But if I have to make the choice, I'm going to go for the person who's, who can show the receipts. They've done it and they've delivered quality film.
So Matt's got a question.
Hi, yeah, sorry about that. So first, I just want to say thank you for taking time to come on here and share your story. It was awesome.
Thank you.
And so I just wanted to ask, how often do you work with like a DIT on set?
Every time.
Every time? So like, what is the relationship like between you and a DIT? Like, what is some common things that kind of happen?
I'm embarrassed to say, but I almost never see them.
Okay. Oh, that sounds normal.
Yeah, they tend to be somewhere on set, and especially now with COVID, kind of isolated. Even before COVID, they were kind of, someone who was isolated. They usually have their station set up with their computer and all everything, and they kind of need to have their own quiet space away from the crazy, right?
Right.
And we protect that person like crazy. Like we want our DIT to be very comfortable and have everything that they need, because ultimately they're, your film movie is in their hands, right? And they have to, they have to be given that space, I guess. But they're part of my camera, we consider them part of our camera department. And we work, we try to find people who are very experienced that, that know what they're doing, because it is such an important job. And, if they, oftentimes whenever I do see the DIT, sometimes it's to see dailies, like if I need to go back and see some footage or relook at some footage just to double check that I got what I needed, or, whatever it was, then sometimes I'll run back there and I'll take a look, real quickly. But for the most part, they're kind of like, kind of like editors on set. They're just kind of in their own little place doing their thing.
One of my experiences of directors interacting with DITs is, for instance, we are coming back to a scene that we shot a few days before, or we have a pickup or something, and we need some context. We would go to the DIT and maybe get them to lay off some video, or text our phones some stills with references. So
yeah, one time we had to work with the DIT on my second movie, and we were shooting on an Arri Alexa, and the camera was, because of the way it was all the setting, the raw footage looked very green in hue, and we knew that it was going to look fine, but the raw footage coming out of it kind of had a bit of a green tint to it. And when we sent that to our executive producer to look at the raw footage, he didn't understand, and he just flipped. He's like, this looks like this is going to be, we can't use any of this footage, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, okay. I guess I forgot we need to add LUT there so that he's, so I go back and I pick the LUT, pick what I'm looking for. And then I'm like, okay, this will work. And, and then he adds the LUT from the rest of the footage, and our executive producer's happy, Right. But but he was a executive producer who's very experienced, by the way. It's just that he wasn't familiar with some of these, quirks of some of these newer cameras. And yeah, exactly. So we had to go in and add the LUT so that it was, it would look right to the executive producer, even though we all knew it was going to be okay. We just had to show him, but yeah.
So Christina's got a question, and Noah, you're right after Christina. And then if anybody else wants to get in line with a question, let me know, because I've only got 2 in the queue right now.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, Christina was a PA on my first movie back in the day, and a stand-in. So we would first PA
the box.
Because then we had no money. We were like, oh, you kind of have similar hair to our lead actress. Can you stand here? Can you stand? So we put her through the ringer. We did.
Yeah, and boy, when I had to take my glasses off, boy didn't even recognize me on the monitor.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah, it was funny. And I bet you none of y'all will believe that I'm 28 years old here. So it's part of my question here.
Is 18 years old working on the film.
Yeah, it's first of all, it's a complete honor hearing you tell that story and knowing that I was part of it, remembering those times and other things. But then, yeah, and you started it all for me, and it's kind of, thanks. I mean, COVID isn't helping, but it's kind of slowed down for me. I'm first and foremost an actor, so that's what I want. I've got an agent, but when I first went for that, the main one in town is Pastor Annie Bosby. Mm-hmm. I got rejected because they said there's too many white brunettes, and they flat out told me that too. And so that was 2 years ago. So they were already working on the diversity question. First question being, based on what I'm hearing on cast and crew, is that hurting me? I feel like all the cast and crew calls that I see don't really or ask for a white, and it doesn't help that I'm 5 feet and very, very petite. You've seen me.
Yeah.
So I mean.
So who are you with now? Who are you with? What agency are you with now?
I'm with Boyson, with Patricia.
Oh, I don't know them.
Patricia Boyson.
Okay.
Relatively new. That's how I was able to get in. And Johnny Ray Gibbs recommended me, so that was a major help. And that's what they say it takes is a recommendation, referral.
Well, that's true. That's true in the industry in general.
And
So
as far as crew goes, what was it? John Sheeran often recommends me to be on a crew. But when you got Adrian Sanchez running around town, I ain't gonna be the chosen one.
well, Adrian's good too. Adrian's great. So I've worked with him too. So, well, here's the thing. So going back to the, going back to the advocacy thing that we talked about earlier with TX and PA. This is why it's so important for you guys. If you're planning on staying in Houston, you've got to advocate for your industry here in Texas. You've got to reach out to your state representatives, especially because they're the ones who vote on the film incentives in our state and the appropriations, all the budget appropriation toward that program, that incentive program. You have to let them know that that you're here, that you are a constituent and you are a film professional and you need work and you're not getting work here because there's not enough work here because of lack of incentives. And the more voices they hear from people like all of you, the more they're going to start listening. Because right now they don't think the film industry has any relevance to our state. If they did, I mean, some people do, but certainly not enough to improve our incentive program to the point where we're actually competitive with our neighboring states like Louisiana and Oklahoma and New Mexico. So right now they seem to not recognize that incentive program needs to get a boost to be able to compete. And the more they hear from you, from all of us, the more they'll listen and recognize the importance of that program. So, and once we get, if we get better incentives, well, then we'll have so many productions we'll be able to pick and choose which ones we want to be on, just like they do in Atlanta, right? So that's the deal. It's on us. We've got to make our voices heard, and we've got to get active. You want to hear a really fun Pastorini Bosby story?
What?
You'll appreciate this one. So when I was making my first movie, by the way, when I made my first movie, I've been working in Houston with Swamp for many years by that point, for like 6 or 7 years. And so everybody knew me. People at Pastorini knew me. The agents knew me. They knew my work. They knew my work with TX and PA. I'd worked with some of them on the TX and PA stuff. Like, they knew who I was back then, even though I hadn't made a movie yet. They knew of my work with Swamp. And when I was starting to cast, I really owe them a lot, because when I started casting for Preacher's Daughter, like I mentioned, I had no money, right? And so I called Pastorini Bosby and said, I want to do some auditions of local actresses for my lead role in my movie, because I didn't think I would be able to hire a Hollywood actress back then. I was thinking I would shoot everything local cast, local everything, right? Because that's what I thought. That's what I thought I had the budget for, right? And Pastorini, there was a woman, I'm not sure if she's still with Pastorini or not. Her name was Sharon. And again, someone who knew me through my work with Swamp, and she basically said, well, our actors don't work for that rate. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, could I still audition them and maybe we might be able to get our rate down? They didn't even want to really give us the time of day. And they did send us some actresses to audition, but it wasn't, wasn't the actresses that I was really wanting to audition, right? The one actress in particular that I was really wanting to audition that they repped, I don't even know if she knew that I wanted to audition her for the role. But I was told under no circumstances were we getting her for less than $250 a day, which I couldn't afford, right? On the budget we had. So I didn't really pursue it. And so then I expanded my auditions. So I'm like, okay, well, I can't get my local agency to take my film seriously. So I'm going to expand my search to Dallas and Austin. Well, I get to Dallas and Austin, and those agents, Linda McAllister sent me her best. The agencies in Austin, they sent me their best. They sent me some really great actors. Whoever I wanted to audition, they sent. Unless the actor was had a conflict or something, they sent me their whoever I was wanting to audition. I didn't have the same experience with those agents as I did with my own home agency here in Houston. And so, you know, but even going through the process of auditioning in those cities, I still wasn't finding the right actress for my lead role. So then I expanded my audition to Los Angeles, and that's how I found Andrea. I've already told you that story. And ended up, but here's the crazy part. When I put the audition notice for LA on Actors Access breakdown services, I know the second that it hit, because my phone went nuts, because I was so green and so naive back then that I actually put my cell phone down as the contact information, which is dumb. Don't do that. But my phone went, I mean, I was at work and my phone went crazy off the hook. And I was having to I finally just had to turn my phone off, and it all went to voicemail. And these were agencies that you've heard of. These were agents from agencies that you know that exist, that you've heard of. They're known talent agencies in Los Angeles. And they were blowing up my phone, but I couldn't get my own home-based agency, Pastorini Bosby, to give me the time of day or take my project seriously. So when it came out that I cast Andrea in the role, suddenly there was a crazy buzz about my movie in Houston, right? Now every actor, including Pastorini's actors, wanted to be on my film, because I was making a movie that had an actress from Desperate Housewives on it, right? And suddenly I'm getting calls and emails from actors directly who were rep by PB saying, we want to audition. Can we audition? And I'm like, you know, talk to your agent. They don't want to work with us. And so Pastorini heard about it. They heard it from the actors, who were furious because they were not being put up for those roles from the very beginning. And as it worked out for me, because I ended up getting Andrea Bowen at my lead, but worked out great. You know, as actually they did me a huge favor. But you know, that's the kind of thing that we sometimes have to face here in Houston. And because we're a very small community, and you know, and it's very much, our local industry is very much driven by commercials. Not as much now even than it used to be, but I mean, commercials are everybody's bread and butter around here. And if you have a feature film that's going to tie up talent for 2 or 3 weeks or more, then and at paying, you know, base scale rate, then they're not going to be as interested in talking to you or letting their talent get tied up on your production, because it could cost them in money that they would earn from commercials, right? So it's, I guess the point of all that story is know your worth. Know your worth. Because of that experience with Pastorini Bosby, I think that's what was in the back of my head whenever I put Andrea's headshot in the no section. Because I'm like, if I can't even get my own talent agency here in Houston to let me cast their talent for less than $250 a day, there's no way in hell I'm getting a star of Desperate Housewives, right? So if you write a really great script, that is gold in this industry. Absolute, pure platinum gold. And you treat it that way when you're talking to the agents, when you're talking to your crew, to whoever it is you're talking to. Know you have a great script, and that this is a script that people are going to want to be involved in. And you keep reminding them that. Do not pass upon this script. Trust me, this is a great script. You want to be a part of this. You want your company to be a part of this. Work with me and fight for your project, because nobody else, if you're not going to fight for your project, nobody else will.
Right.
That's something that I learned on that first movie, for sure.
Christine,
So, anyway.
I have a few thoughts for you. One thought is never let one person or one company make you believe that their single opinion is representative of an entire industry.
Yeah.
You know, just because Pastorini Bosby has that opinion, that doesn't mean anything. And especially consider they're in this tiny little market, And, you know, especially after Michelle's anecdote, you know, they're a small fish, and so what? The other thing that I would tell you is that, you know, now is a time that talent is more important than anything, as it should be for all of us. If you're a damn good actor and you can show it, that's what you need to do. That's what you have control of, and that's going to make a difference. And you know, don't wait for somebody to come knocking on your door to invite you to be in a project. You know, create them. Look at all the people on this Zoom. These are all filmmakers. They're resources to you. You know, create content, put it on, you know, get it on YouTube. You know, you're a brand like Coca-Cola or Chevrolet, and you have to build that brand, you know, simultaneously with building your own skills. As far as your height's concerned, you know, I don't think that's an issue. I mean, I work with actors all the time of, you know, who are tall or short. You know, back in the 50s, you know, they wanted everybody to have a you know, a sort of, you know, uniformity, and they put people on lifts and all of that stuff. And you don't see that really anymore. I mean, you know, people go with, you know, real actors. And again, if you bring the performance, if you're the one who brings that character to life, they're really not going to give a shit about that. And sure, there's going to be a handful of people who may say, "Oh, she's too short." You know, there's a handful of people who are going to look at me and say, "You know, we want a 20-year-old DP. He's 55." It doesn't matter what I've shot or how good my work is. That's just their bias. Well, there's always going to be people like that, and you can't plan your career based on them. They're not the important ones. You're looking for the people who are looking for talent and who appreciate that. And one other thought that I'm going to give to you is I've seen it on more than one occasion where there's a brief for a character, and that character is a man or a woman or is a certain ethnicity, and somebody comes in who doesn't fit that. Say a woman reads for a man's part, or a, you know, African American reads for a Caucasian part, and they bring the performance and they blow that character out of the water, they get the part. I mean, I've seen it so many times. I know actors who have the balls to just go into an audition and read for a role that's not necessarily described as being whatever they are, and they get it. But, you know, again, that's the power of talent, and also the power of just having the balls to put yourself out there and the confidence to take a chance like that.
Yeah, that's one thing Joe Grassafi told me. He because I was when I started, really before I got an agent, everything started talking. I like had doubts. I'm like, you know, I look at the high school range. My acting coach told me my market is 17 and I'm 28, and directors absolutely love that for not having for legal reasons and stuff. So that's an advantage for me. But I had doubts like. I'm a high school area, but I'm not the one I don't have the looks of a high school quarterback's girlfriend. Yeah, you know, I don't have I'm the petite girl that gets bullied all the time. And
yeah, but I bet you if you want to play those kind of roles, find yourself a makeup artist and a stylist and get some pictures done that make you look like that. I mean, remember, you will get hired to do what you show you can do. You will get hired to play the roles that people see that you look like. And I, you know, a good hairstylist, a good makeup artist, a good wardrobe stylist, and you could play whatever, anything you want.
You should have seen her wedding. She was stunning.
What?
Yeah. And, you know, one other thing that I would tell you is, you know, if you can, don't limit yourself to the Houston market. Michelle's living proof that you can have your residence in Houston and get opportunities out of other places. You know, look at Austin. Austin is bumping. Look at New Orleans. I mean, New Orleans is working a lot. You know, Atlanta, Santa Fe, Los Angeles. Some of the most busiest and in-demand people I know in Houston, like Michelle, like composer Scott Szabo, like composer Jeff Walton, all those people regularly come to LA. They have relationships here. They have meetings here. You know, remember, your opportunities will come from who you know. And if who you know is, hobbyist filmmakers and wannabe filmmakers, that's what your opportunities are going to be.
I have a lot of connections in town. That's like out of that if there's anything I have big time in town, and that's connections. I have 135 mutual friends with you, Michelle. But before COVID, I was in the process of trying to become SAG eligible, because that's, if you want to get to LA level, you at least have to be SAG eligible. And so I was working on that, and the next step I was trying was to get an agent either over in Louisiana or Georgia. But COVID kind of put the brakes on that, and and also I'm trying to get more coaching with Sarah Gaston as well, because I used to be able to be more active, because there used to be constant festivals in town, 48 hours and stuff like that, and that's where I got most of my footage. But I don't have enough on my reel like I need, and it's because of that. So it's like I don't know if I should submit to these agents when I ain't getting anything else. I'm kind of stuck where I'm at, not having anything.
Remember,
so the question being, is there anything going on in town behind my back that I'm not realizing?
remember that talent is paramount. If somebody wants you bad enough, they'll Taft-Hartley you. You don't have to be SAG to get a SAG job. I mean, so work on your chops. Keep learning. Keep taking classes and workshops. Keep making content, so you do have a lot of stuff to show.
Right. I know Joe makes a lot of films, so he would be a good person to try to get some footage with. Even if it's just, having him direct you in a couple of scenes where you tape it. It doesn't have to be in an actual film. You could take it, go find a scene from one of your favorite movies, and, just not a Disney one. And because that's copyright infringement. But, but you want to take a scene from from a film, or, and act the heck out of that scene. Do a monologue and act the heck out of that monologue, and get Joe to direct you and film it. And that'll do more for you than, a 48-hour film, probably, quite frankly. So, yeah. So, but yeah, just keep working at it. You'll get there. You're, like you said, you're 28, but you play 18. You've got plenty of, you've got time.
Yeah.
And remember too, the more you work, the better you get. Every time you work, you're going to learn something new. You're going to build that muscle. I mean, sitting around waiting for opportunity doesn't build a skill level. So even if it's just you and a friend and somebody shooting you with a cell phone, always be working. There's this great story that somebody told once about an event at the DGA, which is the Directors Guild, and somebody came up on stage and they asked the audience, what does the director do? People were saying, a director guides the vision of the film, and the director, crafts the performances of the actors. And the person on the stage said, that's all partially right. The real answer is a director directs. And so many people forget that. So many people have business cards that say, I'm a director, but then you look at their schedule, I'm like, well, what have you been doing? So remember that as an actor, you've got to act. You build those muscles. No matter how good you are today, if you go and do some projects and shoots and look at your work and critique yourself and improve yourself, a month from now, you'll be better than you are today. So just like going to the gym, work it out,
Michelle, would you say in 10 years you see any difference in me? Because I was 18 when I worked for you.
Not at all. You look exactly the same. Exactly.
How old did I look at my wedding?
Exactly the same. You were gorgeous. Absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
So Noah's got a question, and I don't have anybody else in the queue, so we'll close out with Noah's question.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. Thank you again for having this. Hi. I just shot a short film, and I would like to pitch it as a proof of concept for a feature or a series. During this COVID time, what is the best approach to that? Is it through film festivals or connections? I don't have that many connections, but what do you think is the best approach to that?
That's a really great question, because we're kind of in these weird sort of unprecedented times. The answer that I would have given, a year ago can't be the same answer that I give you now. I guess my question is, so you made this short film is it sort of a self-contained short film that you can like submit to film festivals and so forth, but then it has sort of you want to expand it into either a feature film or a series? Is that the
it was actually shot as a pilot episode for a series.
Oh, wow.
About 12 minutes. Yes,
Okay.
can you hear me? Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
it's a little
about,
echoey.
oh, I'm sorry. It was about 12 minutes. It was actually shot as a pilot, but I would like to pitch it out there as either a series or you know, a film. But it can be, it's more of like a beginning. Like in a film, it would be probably like the first 12 minutes of the film. So it's more like as a part of a bigger project.
So let's you know, like I said, we are picking up series we're pitching, but the series that we take on are series that are completed, that all episodes are completed, and we're taking out selling them as a completed series season. But if you're in development on a series, it's a lot different than like if you were making a feature film, because if you're making a feature film, then you know you can go raise your money, you know, largely through equity investors. You know, a combination of equity investors, soft money, incentive money, and potentially gap money if you get into that budgetary range. And then you make the film, and then you take it out to the market and you sell it, right? It's a little harder to do it that way with a series because, you know, you're likely looking at, you know, multiple hours. You know, it's much bigger project than a feature film, right? And you know, series really does need to have a home. It really needs to have a place where it's going to be shown. You know, for the most part, the series that I'm repping is a series that does have distribution in Canada. It's a Canadian series, and my job is to sell it to the rest of the world, including the United States. So they already had built-in distribution for Canada, and could make it, and then you know go to exploit it to the rest of the world on their own afterwards. So this is a little bit different than what you're doing. I guess to answer your question, it's good that you have the 12-minute concept piece, but you're really going to need, do you have like a Bible?
No, I just have, right now I have the outline of the whole storyline.
Yeah.
And I was planning on writing a feature script from that, just in case, you know, anybody.
I'm putting in a couple of links here for you to look at on your here on Zoom, because I think you should take a look at this, because every series, I don't care if you are, you know, the Russo brothers or whoever, if you have a series you're pitching to Netflix or anybody else, you need what's called a series Bible. And basically what it is a narrative, like outline of what your series is going to be about, who the characters are, what the tone of the series is going to be, what the look of the series is going to be, you know, who your target demo audience is. All of these things need to be really spelled out, because you're pitching not just one thing, you're pitching multiple episodes, a story arc that could go for 13 to 23 episodes. You're pitching character arcs that could go 13 to 23 episodes. It's a much bigger thing, right? And so I just put in a link for it's called shortscripts.com TV series Bibles, and you could actually legit look at TV series Bible from Breaking Bad, you know, all Fargo, all these popular, Grey's Anatomy. So find a series Bible that's similar to your series, or at least similar in tone to your series, and take a look at the Bible and learn how to structure that Bible in a way to where you can sell it. Because it's great having the concept piece, but you must have the Bible, the pitch, so I just put that in there. I'm going to put one more thing in here, which is the Bible for the series The Wire. I'm not sure if you watched that series. If not, I highly recommend it.
I've heard it's really good.
It's amazing. one of the best TV series ever written. I mean, best written TV series of all time. So take a look at that, and it gives you an idea of how to write your narrative in a way to sell it to. So if you get a Bible and you get that concept pitch, 12-minute like pilot as your sort of concept piece, you can take that to the agencies. So you take that to like CAA or ICM or, you know, different agencies out there, Paradigm, you know, they all do what's called packaging. Now, packaging is kind of in a weird place right now because the WGA has basically fought with the agencies to prevent them from doing that exact thing, packaging, right? And making money off of the packaging, right? But what those agencies can do is they can help you attach the right people, because you're going to need a showrunner. You know, they're not going to let you be the showrunner because you've never been a showrunner. You know, like most networks want to have experienced showrunners for the show. You can be the creator of the show. You can negotiate a deal where you're one of the key writers of the show, but they're very very unlikely to let you be the showrunner, because that's just how the industry works, right? And so they're going to help you find a showrunner who could take that show to the networks, and the networks are going to look at the Bible. They're going to talk to the showrunner. They're going to talk to you as the creator, and then they're going to decide whether they're going to green light the pilot. And they're going to need a full pilot episode. So if it's an hour-long episode, it has to be a pilot that's, you know, 56 pages long, 50 to 56 pages long. If it's a half-hour pilot, then it needs to be a 24 to 27 page pilot, right? Script. And they're going to take meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, and then if they really like the project, they're going to greenlight the pilot, and then you'll go shoot the pilot. And if they like the pilot, then they greenlight the series. It's a huge undertaking. So that's the traditional way of doing things. The non-traditional traditional way of doing things is doing what I like to call the Greg Carter approach, which is, I'm just going to go make my series. I'm going to shoot every single episode, and I'm going to pay for it myself, or get my friend, get my people, my investors to invest. And I'm going to go make this series, and I'm going to go sell it to, a streamer. And in his case, he sold it to a Roku channel called Urban Movie Channel, UBC, right? And that first season, he had to finance the whole thing himself. He had to figure out how to get the money. I mean, I don't know if it came out of his own pocket, but he raised the money, shot all the episodes, and then took it to the Urban Movie Channel, and they licensed it, right? And he owns everything. And then the Urban Movie Channel, streamed all the episodes, and I guess did a good enough job. They got enough audience where Urban Movie Channel then came back and said, we want a season 2. And then in season 2, I believe they put money into it. So season 2, Urban Movie Channel, put some money into and I think they're going to be shooting season 3. I think they actually shot season 2 and season 3 at the same time. So there's actually Urban Movie Channel paid for 2 seasons that they filmed back to back. Now, this is still very low budget filmmaking. It's very guerrilla style, indie filmmaking, but it's applied to a series project versus a indie film project. And you're certainly capable of doing that. If you can get out there and make a series that's quality, that is multi-episode, I would say at least 8 episodes, but ideally more like 10 to 13, and it's good, then you could probably, so there's lots of channels out there looking for series. I mean, series are, why do you think that series would be more appealing to buyers than indie films?
I would be fine with either one, actually,
Right. Well, you got to know, if you're making a series, then you have to approach it very differently than if you're making an indie film. So you really need to know, like, what's best for the story. Like, think of the story and which which of those best suits that story? Is that story best suited by being a feature film, or is that story best served by being a series? And so make that decision. And if you think it's a series, then you know, you just have to figure out how to get that first season made without the support of, you know, but so think about it from the buyer's perspective. So like I said earlier, digital platforms, right? A lot of them are subscription based. So you pay a monthly fee and then you can watch as much content as you want, you know, on that service. It makes more sense for the buyers of those platforms to buy series than it does one-off movies, because their whole model is based on subscription, which means they want people to come back day after day after day watching content, because if there's no content for them to watch, they're going to unsubscribe. They're not going to pay for the subscription anymore. So they have to keep their content. They want content that will get people to come back and watch over and over and over again. Series does that. One-off movies does not necessarily do that in and of themselves, you know. So series are hot commodities when it comes to buyers, but you're not always going to have, you're not always going to have, you know, especially if it's your first time to make a series and you want to be the showrunner, you're going to have to figure out how to raise the money and get that first season made, and then hope, like Issa Rae did with her series on YouTube. And, you know, she took that chance on herself. She put herself out there, created her series, and then it got picked up by a network later, right? So you're seeing a lot more of that happening, but unfortunately that means that first season you're going to have to really, you know, do it on your own. But they still are doing it the traditional way, which is, you know, going to Hollywood, getting the agencies to package it, getting a showrunner, and, you know, then going after bigger studio deals, right? But I mean, without knowing your story, I couldn't really tell you which one I would recommend. So.
Hey, Noah, I put Greg Carter's Facebook page link in the chat.
Okay.
So, you know, you might want to reach out to him.
Okay.
I mean, maybe he could even be a mentor for you. You know, mentors are a really good thing to consider for success, and that applies to everybody. As you know, find somebody who's more experienced than you and is making a living doing what you want to do. You know, and maybe even more than just one or two people, and reach out to them. And you know, honestly, if you have IMDb Pro, a lot of people, I mean, not the big A-list people, but a lot of, you know, mid-level people will have, you know, direct contacts, you know, and you could just, you know, or you could even Google people, you never know, or try LinkedIn. But you know, consider reaching out to people who do projects that you like, and, you know, find out who they are and reach out to them. You know, a lot of people like Michelle and myself, you know, we have successful careers, and we're committed to supporting and uplifting the people coming up, you know, in you know, now in this generation. And a lot of people feel that way. It's a matter of paying forward the opportunities you got when you were starting out. You know, so don't assume that they won't talk to you. You know, again, a lot of success in this business is, you know, having the confidence and the chutzpah, you know, to take the big gamble, to try something that's, you know, kind of scary or most people wouldn't do. You know, just like, you know, Michelle getting Andrea Bowen, or, you know, my friend Candace getting Xander, or, you know, any number, or Michelle just saying, I'm going to make a movie. I mean, all of those are big rolls of the dice, and you can't win big if you don't bet big.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
So Michelle, would you like to have any closing comments to wrap things up?
No, not just that, you know, I mean, I just would be curious, like, what's everybody's like focus? Like, I know Christina said kind of like what her focus is, but I'd like to hear about some of the other participants. Like, what is your, like, dream job in the industry, I guess, or what is it you're focusing on pursuing in this industry? What aspect of the industry? Brittany?
I'm just here to learn whatever I can. Before you came into the call, I was letting everybody know that I've done crafty and catering before. I wouldn't mind like continuing doing that. I've directed 2 super short films and a music video, so I'm like slowly leaning towards being a director, kinda, but I don't know yet. I'm still just learning everything that I can first before I figure out where I most fit.
I would say that the most important job on the movie set is catering and crafty. My opinion. More important than directors. I said directors set the tone on the set. No, it's not. I'm lied. It's catering and crafty that sets the tone of the set. Very important job. Okay, Katya, what was your?
Yes, well, like Brad said, I'm an aspiring director. We met through my professor, Brad and I, when I was in college, and you know, I started like volunteer for some of the projects, and he asked me what position on set I liked the most, or in college, and I liked directing. So he's like, well, you won't become a director overnight, so why don't you try yourself as a script supervisor? And so that's what I started doing. And you know, and then I joined the union, and I just became a script supervisor, and I love it. You know?
I gotta tell you, there's really no better, other than maybe editor, there's no better job on a film set to help prepare you to be a director than script supervisor, because
Exactly.
you know the shots, you know what coverage you need, you know how to look at a scene and say, okay, this is what the coverage that we need to you know, and you're watching it, you get to sit front row seat of the directors while the director's working. And see what they're, you know, see how they approach their craft. So it really is the ideal job for, you know, for a hiring director.
I agree with you. But you know how you were saying that you were putting it off, you know, directing your first film, and well, you did short films anyway, but this is what I'm doing. I'm putting it off a little bit. I'm like, okay, I'm going to write. So I start writing, and, you know, then things come up, and I have a small child, and, you know, just life happens. And so that's been.
If I have any regrets, that's what it is I waited and waited and waited too long. I mean, who knows? Maybe if I had made this movie when I was in my 20s, it wouldn't have been as successful, and it would have gone anywhere. I mean, maybe the timing was perfect, and I just don't know. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? But you know, it's hard to second guess those kinds of things. But I do wish that I had made my movie sooner. I wish I had made it, you know, back in early 2000s instead of, you know, 2020, you know, in 2010. And, you know, give it maybe 5 or 6 years before even would have been better, because, you know, because now I feel like I'm kind of playing catch up with my career in some ways. And I mean, I'm not complaining, because I've actually done a lot more than many people who even made movies the same, and more successful movies. Even there are people who've made films at the same time I made my film and had bigger successes, but then they're kind of like not doing anything now. So like, you know, so I guess, you know, it really boils down to, you just got to bite the bullet and do it. You know, it's going to be hard, and it's going to be hard on your family, and you need to get that support network really behind you and make sure they understand how important this is to you. And get them on board, because there's going to be, you know, while you're in production, if you're in production for 3 weeks, you cannot be a mom.
Yep.
You've got to be director for 3 weeks, and somebody else has to take care of those kids. Like, you know, send them to grandparents for, you know, for a few weeks and say it's like vacation or something, and then make your movie, or send them to, you know, or have your, you know, I don't know if you're married or not, but, you know, make sure everybody who's, you know, with you are with you and are supporting you, and understand that for that time while you're in pre-production and production, you cannot be the person that they think that you normally are to them. You can't be mom, you can't be wife, you can't be anything but director. That's it.
And if I have questions, may I reach out to you?
Of course, always.
Thank you.
I'll type in my email address for everybody so you have it. Okay. Was that it? Let's see. Who else? We have Sarita.
So I guess you could say I try to figure out how to put myself, because I think I'm like an overall filmmaker at the end of the day, because I try to learn as much as I possibly can.
That's good. That's smart.
And because my ultimate goal is essentially to be a executive producer, but I don't want to be like a suit that just kind of gives money and like tells everybody, like just, you know what I mean? So I try to just do everything I can. So I've done art on 2 features. I've produced a few short films and music videos and things like that. I write, I edit, and then I PA. Anytime I get opportunity to PA, I PA and try to help everybody that I possibly can.
Have you taken Swamp's PA workshop?
I haven't.
You should definitely look into that.
Yeah, I talk to Chloe a lot. I know she runs that quite often, so I talk to her a lot. She helps me with a few things. She's really cool. She's really nice, so I like talking to her and learning from her. But I haven't had a chance to take the workshop. But yeah, I just try to do it. I try to do anything that I possibly can, just so I can learn anything that I possibly can. So that I know, I just like to know what everybody's going through. So
yeah, no, it's a good idea, because so here's the thing with that. Like I tell people, like go work either as an intern or PA, or in every department you can, and learn that department from the inside. Because even if you at the end of the day decided I'm not really into the wardrobe department, or I'm not really into what art department or whatever, it's important for you to understand how that department works as a filmmaker.
Exactly.
So that when they come to you asking questions, you understand what they need from you to be able to answer, to be able to do their job, right?
Yes.
So that's, it benefits you even if you end up being a director, so definitely encourage that. Let's see who else we have. Christopher, I know what you want to be. I already know.
So yeah, I want to be. My main focus is cinematography. So I do want to be a cinematographer.
You're very good at it, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm actually in the middle of working on my second demo reel, because
Nice.
I also have been looking at some new cameras. I'm looking at some new toys right now. I worked on, honestly, I don't even have a number anymore. I worked on short films. I worked on music videos. I've worked on some corporate stuff, some yeah, I don't even remember. I have to look. I'm sorry.
Great. Well, it sounds like you're keeping busy. And you're building a good reel for yourself. That's awesome.
Yeah, I've actually, of course, I worked as PA for plenty of things, including, I think, Santa Tatum, which I believe that was one project that you worked on too, if I'm not
I
mistaken.
have no idea what you're talking about.
No. I can't remember. Sorry, I just got off of a set, so my mind is.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I'm just having everybody just sort of say what area they're interested in. So we got yours. We're good. So Noah, Sabrina, which one do you want to go next?
I'll go next.
Tell me what you're up. So what are you kind of focused on in this industry? What area are you most interested in?
So I work as a second AC, and I love my camera team. I believe my starry-eyed goal would be a director, but at the same time, I just love composing an image, like making it look exactly as I see it in my head. I don't know if it's practical to be a DP and director, but I'm really passionate about both. Like, I really love my camera team, but I also love the way the director, like you said, is kind of the visionary and the director.
Well, look what Rachel's doing she's a DP by that was her, she came up as a DP, and then, next thing you know, she's directing, like the key director behind, not director, she was the DP on Handmaid's Tale, right? and got a lot of recognition. And because of her recognition of her work on Handmaid's Tale, which is beautifully shot, was given opportunities to direct. And but when she directs, she's not a DP, you know. So you know, definitely, you know, you can do both. I just don't necessarily encourage doing it on the same project because those are very different jobs.
Yeah.
They require very specific skill sets that's hard to do both at your absolute best if you are trying to do both. You know, I would encourage you to pick one and then hire somebody to do the other. If you want to be director, then hire a DP, you know. Otherwise, just be, you know, you can be the DP, you know, and work with a director. But, you know, because and both of those jobs are so huge that it's very hard to do both of them at the same time. But not impossible. I mean, I've seen people do it. It's just, you know.
No, I mean, they require 100% of your attention and like heart into it, and like splitting it into both. Yeah.
I've had some DPs pretend who think that they were the director.
Lord.
Not Brad. Some other ones.
Sabrina,
Okay, Noah, you're the last one.
Sabrina, there are people who are direct DPs, and you know, it's not a common thing, but especially in commercials, there, you know, it's more of a thing in commercials. But there are a few director DPs. I mean, Robert Rodriguez is often a director DP. I think James Cameron, no, not James Cameron, James Carpenter, and the guy Peter Hyams, the guy who did Outland, also is a director DP. I can tell you, I don't aspire to be a director, but I have been offered some jobs as a DP that were contingent on me directing. So I've done it. I've director DP'd a feature, and I've director DP'd true crime recreations for a television series.
No, I remember that when I was working with you. You killed it in both, but
yeah. I mean, you know, if you want at some point, we can, I mean, there's things that I did on both of those to hedge my bets, because Michelle's right. I mean, both of them are a complete job. So part of the trick is handing a little bit of the responsibilities off to other people. And then also just having a strong team to back you up. Like when I've been director DP, I've not operated the camera. I've had other people operate. But, you know, saying director DP means that not only do you frame the shot, but you're responsible for the lighting. You know, there's another iteration of that. For instance, Ridley Scott, he doesn't do the lighting, but Ridley Scott does all his camera operating. You know, so he is framing the shots and directing, but he's not taking on the burden of lighting the scenes. So, you know, there's different variations on that to consider.
No, that's actually a very good point. That's something that I've thought about and wrestled with, because you are right. They're both for their own separate job. They require, again, like 100% of your attention. And then I feel like one would falter. So like juggling that, I don't know.
If you were more experienced, like a lot more experienced in both of those jobs, I think it would be better. But especially if you're like, you know, if it's your first movie, for instance, you don't, you know, you're for me, it would be, you know, self-sabotage. You know, I would, you know, I just don't have the skill set to be able to do those two ginormous jobs at the same time. But you know, but I definitely think we need more female DPs. I ain't gonna lie, I love it, and directors, female directors and DPs. You know, both need it. All right, Noah, last one.
Yes, definitely a writer and director. That's my passion. So that's my goal. So yeah, that's pretty much.
Cool. Are you at the gym?
Yeah. Yeah, I am.
Dedication, Noah. Dedication.
Oh man, I'm trying to get knowledge while I try to lose some weight. So.
Now this guy, I think, can multitask. Like he's working at a workshop and he's working out at the same time. He's that's great. Oh. Well, very cool. Well, it's been wonderful meeting all of you, and I'm excited I'm really glad Brad put together this group and that you guys meet regularly, And you know, COVID's allowed us to, you know, sort of commune and via, you know, from a distance, and it's really cool. And I think you guys, you know, the most important thing I can say is just get out there and like network, get to know people, connect with each other, make some films together, short films, you know, short pilot, whatever it is, you know, even TV series, and you know, just make sure your work is as good as it can possibly be. You know, really, you know, take your work seriously, because like I said, nobody's going to take you seriously until they realize, oh, we should be taking this person seriously. And the only way that that's going to happen is you got to show that you're serious, right? You're someone who needs to be taken seriously. So trust me now, whenever I call Pastorini Bosby, they answer the call and they don't give me crap anymore. So they take my project seriously now. So, so that's, I guess we'll end on that note.
Michelle, thank you so much for your generous time and sharing your incredible breadth of knowledge and experience with everybody. I mean, I'm just, even though I know you, I'm still blown away, you know, hearing, you know, how broadly you know the business. It's so impressive. You're such an asset to the community, you know, and to Houston.
I'm afraid that you're the DP who shot Toxic. Like, dude.
I cannot get over it myself.
So everybody, thank you for joining. You know, for those of you who joined late, we did record this one, so I'll be posting it, if not tonight, tomorrow, so you can, you know, watch the beginning and see the parts that you missed. And thank you so much. You know, appreciate your participation, and you know, stay tuned, and we'll, you know, it's going to be hard to follow Michelle. She's quite a sensational act, but we'll find somebody for next month.
Maybe Greg Carter. I hear
that's a good idea. I don't know him. I will reach out to him. That's a terrific idea, actually. Noah, did you hear that?
Tell him Michelle said that the gauntlet's been passed. He's got
Yes, I heard that. Thank you, guys.
I'll reach out to Greg Carter for next month.
All right.
Okay. Cool. Thank you, guys.
You reach out to him tomorrow. That's your homework assignment.
All right. Thank you. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Have a nice week.
You too. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.